of the CPDC to order. And Julie, did you want to talk about protocol?
Sure. So welcome everybody to tonight's meeting of the CPDC. It's Monday, November 1st. Here in the select board room at Town Hall, we have Chair Pam Adrian and John Weston. On the Zoom screen, we have Heather Klisch and Tony DiRezzo. From staff, there's me, Julie Mercier, Community Development Director, and Staff Planner Andrew McNichol. The way these meetings are typically run is that the development team will give a presentation to the CPDC. The CPDC will get a chance to ask questions and have a dialogue with the development team. And then the CPDC chair will open it up for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment and you're on Zoom, please raise your hand or use the raise hand tool in Zoom, which is under reactions, I think. It gets moved, but I think it's under reactions. If you're in the room with us and you'd like to make a comment, raise your hand, and when you're acknowledged by the chair, you can do that. And at all other times, please remain muted if you're on Zoom so that everybody in the room and on Zoom can hear the presentation. And the meeting is being recorded by RCTV. I think that's about everything. So thanks, Pam.
Right. We'll take the two continuance. There is a continuance for Woburn Street. Heather, did you want to read that?
I went to go unmute myself and the whole screen changed. Sorry about that. You want me to read this letter or just move to continue?
We can read the letter and you just move to continue.
Okay, so the letter is that on behalf of GC Federa Contracting Incorporated, we respectfully request the Commission to continue the hearing scheduled for November 1, 2021 to the Commission's next available hearing date on December 13th, 2021. The applicant is working with the town engineer to address access questions. We believe in the interest of time and efficiency, a continuance is appropriate. So with that, I move to continue the application for 18 Woburn Street to December 13th at, I don't know, Julie, what time?
8:30 p.m.
At 8:30 p.m.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call. We have 4 people. We don't have to do roll call.
You do have to do, since 2 are on Zoom, I would.
Yes. So
Yes.
2, Heather?
Yes.
Tony, I think you're on?
Yes.
Okay. Our second continuance is the Johnson Woods.
It's actually a withdrawal, Pam.
It's a withdrawal.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Okay, how do we treat that?
do you have the letter?
I do
Just
have the
you
letter.
can do it similarly and then vote to allow
Okay.
the applicant to withdraw without prejudice.
Well done. Clap your hands and it pops up there. Can you see this?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see this. So I'll read this letter.
Yes.
So regarding Johnson Woods, the applicant understands that some residents are concerned about the level of construction activity at Johnson Woods at this time. While residents on Trevor Court favor garages, Johnson Woods Realty Corp understands the disruptive nature of construction and hereby withdraws without prejudice its request for a minor modification for the 2 garages. So do we need to move to accept their withdrawal, or is that just enough?
I think it's just procedurally good to just move to accept it.
Move to
All right, so I move to accept the withdrawal for the minor amendment for Johnson Woods Drive, the minor amendment to approve PUDR Johnson Woods Drive.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of approving the withdrawal? That's 2 of us, Tony and Heather.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right,
Thank you.
moving right along. And this is the Chute Street. Do we have a representative for the Chute Street?
We can't start Chute Street until 8:30 p.m.
8:30?
Sorry, I'm sorry, but that's when it's been advertised, right? 8:30, am I wrong? Okay, yeah, so this hour we were gonna fill with other business, which we have
I
plenty of.
figured you would do
It's
that.
not that I should have read more slowly or anything like that.
Sorry. It would just be unfair to all the people that want to hear what you have to say about the project. So,
Right, so we have minutes, are those printed off, or?
so you could start with minutes if you want, or we could go through some of the stuff that we have for town meeting next week.
All right, let's do the town meeting issues.
Okay.
Yes, did you have an open issue?
Yeah, can I just speak briefly to the commission about something?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We have a question. Why didn't you come up?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so we have a little sticky on the ground, and that's where the owl will pick you up the best for everybody.
All right,
I'm Mary Ellen O'Neill. I live at 125 Summer Ave, and I did want to talk with you about Johnson Woods specifically. I'm here for something else, but I did want to talk with you about that.
yes.
A friend of mine lives in a neighboring street, and she bought that in '04. The first approval for the phase one was in '04. I'm not sure exactly when construction got underway, but certainly by '05, it's been going on a very long time. And CPDC has never had anything, there's no development like this in town. They have close to 40 acres down there. So a couple of my questions are, one is, there were certain promises made to the town. So some of the things in those two decisions of '04 and '11 speak to, not as conditions, but they're in the narrative about 50% open space. Well, there's far from 50% open space down there. A trail was mentioned in phase one and referred to in the narrative as connecting to, local pathways and things, both times. They have random signs. It's a disgrace down there. So she and I walked the whole property last Thursday. Some of the original garden-style, flat-style buildings are starting to show their age. Some in the back there are spectacular looking. They've got a number, you could hear the clanging and the digging going on from her house, and I'm like, you've been listening to this all these years? I don't think anyone foresaw, I don't think we have any guidelines for something that lasts and is disruptive to the neighborhood for this long. And there's still areas marked out. A beautiful stands of trees that are yet to be going, because he'll do one area, move quite a distance away, build another, circle back. And so people are buying and they're thinking, isn't this lovely? And then in 5 years, more trees come down and more is filled in. So I was wondering if you might follow up on some of these issues and just to educate yourself about what's going on down there, if there are any options to kind of, come on, let's finish this up. It's been dragging on for 16 years. They had explosives going this fall. They're still dynamiting down there. And all the things in there about minimizing cut and fill and saving trees. It hasn't happened down there. So if there's...
We have spent more than tens of hours, right?
Yeah.
So multiple, since I've been on the board, right, I would
And
say.
Nick before you.
And before me, I would say that we have spent, each year we probably spend somewhere around 8 to 10 hours on hearing different changes. I'm not exaggerating, right, Julie?
No, not at all.
No, yeah,
No.
at least 8 to 10 hours of this
Right.
board's time with that development, with all the changes and the ongoing things. So, the board is sort of well aware of the issues and continue to do what we can to push them to A, provide a clear understanding of what they're doing, and B, a process to the end and
Yeah.
finishing it up. We only have, right, it's private property, they can do what they want, and so we only have so much power to control.
Do you have any say, they have foundations built for a couple of garages
Yeah.
already, so. Do we have any say over the trail? Do we have anything that we can follow up with them and see? Did you do anything other than, make millions, I'm sorry, down here on this, like 40 acres of land?
I do believe that all the conditions that they were required to meet, that they have met or are meeting.
That was a condition though in the first phase, John.
Right. So
The
there have
trail was a
been,
condition of
right,
phase one.
the problem is that you need to track through the 8 to 10 to 12 changes that they've made over the time. And at some point I don't know about the trail specifically, but I do know that a lot of things were traded and agreed to through the period. So you can't look at just what was approved in phase one. You have to look through all of the amendments, which
Okay.
has been part of the difficulty.
Yeah,
I do have it on my list to look into what we're supposed to be doing about that trail.
Okay.
I have to
Yeah.
piece together a lot of history, going back 5 or 6 planners, hundreds of modifications.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lot of
Right,
stuff
and
to
some of
put
those came
together.
to town meeting, I just don't remember anything being said about trails. They're always like, add this little piece of property or add this, you know, not losing anything,
Right.
other than
Yeah.
lots of open
Yeah.
space, which they really have, you know, done.
At one time, I think we asked for a master plan that said, let's give us everything that, all the changes you're going to make. And that never materialized, as I understand it.
Because I don't think we have really much enforcement power, unfortunately, hold much over their head at this point.
Right,
So
aside
far,
from making sure,
Follow up afterwards.
Clearly identifying what the commitments were and making sure that we hold them to those.
All right, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay,
Look,
Julie.
I'm gonna say, believe me, we feel the frustration. We've heard from lots of people in that development, so.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but it is still so noisy
Yes.
too. You know?
Understood.
Okay.
All right.
So, there is a subsequent town meeting starting next Monday. And there are 2 items relating to the CPDC on the warrant. The first one is the site plan changes that you all worked on over the summer. And I prepared a presentation. I was hoping to just quickly go through, and if you guys want to give me any high-level feedback, or if you've looked at it, I think it was in your packet. You have ideas, I think pretty straightforward. So I'll just share my screen really quick. And, okay. So, my view, okay. Do you see all right, good. Okay, so just going, it's Article 6 on the warrant, zoning bylaw amendment, site plan review. The purpose of the amendment is to rework and refine the triggers for site plan review and minor site plan review to allow the CPDC to review more projects without being overburdensome on applicants and businesses. That was a fine line I feel like we tried to walk. And it resolves a conflict with the term change of use. The reason for the amendment is to ensure that the CPDC has the appropriate level of review for projects that propose changes to uses, sites, structures, parking, and/or circulation. So then I get into the meat of it. So the change of use conflict, in the definition section of the bylaw, it's defined as a reclassification from one line to another in the use table. And then in the site plan section, it's defined as a change from one use category to another. The issue here is that we use this site plan section when we determine what comes in for a site plan, and use categories are pretty broad, and some projects that should be reviewed are not. And so then changes to the triggers. Okay, so I tried to simplify it over here in the red boxes about what's going on. So site plan review triggers, basically one trigger would be a change that an increase in gross floor area of 500 square feet or more that also creates a new parking requirement, or a change of use to a use that would be something that requires a special permit. So either one of those scenarios would require a full site plan review. And then changes to minor site plan review. So here we have new floor area or expansion could stand on its own and trigger a minor site plan review. Or changes to parking or pavement stand on their own and trigger a minor site plan review, or a change of use to another use that's allowed by right. So those would be the things that someone would have to apply for minor site plan review for. And then I note just down here in red that for people at town meeting that are trying to make sense of what's happening, the trigger B here is very similar to the trigger C that was deleted from site plan review. So it was basically just moved down into minor, that trigger. Okay, and then these are the minor site plan review triggers that aren't changing, they're just moving down in the list. And you see the new one that got added in April is here at the bottom. And there's no changes to these triggers. And then one procedural clarification. under the section that allows for administrative approval, we add in the term change of use. So that covers all the different things that can happen with these applications. So that's the story. I welcome any feedback you might have for me on
It
that.
seems so simple.
Did I oversimplify it?
No, I don't think you did. I think that there's probably a lot of questions that come from it, but I think, right, it truly is simple. I mean, it took forever to get there, but I think simple is good, and that's what we're aiming for.
Great.
I agree. One thing I would change for town meeting, just knowing that there's a real range of knowledge on all the people that are in town meeting, is I might explain what the difference is between site plan and minor site plan review and minor site plan review. Just in general. So,
Yep.
to kind of
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
help underscore the reason for the differentiation.
Yep. That's a really good idea.
I would say, but also what doesn't come out is the, say, one of the primary reasons for the change, which I think if you focus too much on that differentiation between site plan review and minor site plan review, it may get lost. People may focus on, well, you're changing from this review type to that review type, when the real issue was there were changes that were happening that weren't getting reviewed at all.
Right. Okay.
And so we made that change, but also tried to make sure that the review type wasn't too onerous.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's such a good point that even on is it the first slide number 3 on the deck, basically, is we may want to start with why is this amendment needed, and then what the amendment does. I'm just going to that order that John just kind of described.
Okay, that's true. That's a good idea. Great.
You said there was another issue that's up?
Yeah, and then it's actually, I guess less of an issue, as I learned late today, but so I worked with Heather and Tony to put together a report on the status of our 40R bylaw update for the warrant, which I think was mailed out last week. So, and that was included in your packet, just to give you a heads up that will be happening at town meeting. I was informed tonight, though, that Cpdc will not be able to give a presentation on that report at town meeting. So hopefully people will read their warrant. Yeah, so in the warrant report, there's and so that's basically the statement from Cpdc about the 40R bylaw update process. They're not going to be able to give a presentation at town meeting. That's just what I was told. So.
That's really a procedural problem, right? Because the reason why we're doing this is because in the first place is because the whatever you call it, citizens petition, that's not the right term.
Instructional motion.
The
Instructional motion.
Right, the instructional motions are made, right, essentially on the floor of town meeting with with good intentions, but maybe not a whole lot of background, and not time for people to pull background together for the rest of town meeting. So what may sound good at first blush doesn't have the wealth of information that town meeting really should have in making even making the instructional motion, because they're only getting one side. So now right, they're again just getting a report and not getting one side with no discussion. I think there's a flaw in the way that that whole process operates.
I concur. I'm actually just kind of wondering, is that just because giving a report does give an opportunity for people to comment or ask questions, and that's valuable. Was it just a matter of too much being jammed into town meeting, and so there's not time for it? Do you know I'm just curious about what the rationale was, if you know.
I wasn't given a reason, but I was assuming you would be able to, and I was going to start working on it. And so I just shot off an email and then was told that it's not happening. So I'll try to find out more about that, but I don't know at this time. It literally just found out like an hour ago. So
Right.
yeah.
It very well could be Zoom related. I don't believe any reports have really been given. The standard school report, RMLD report, and even state of the town. If they were given, they were cut back significantly.
Yeah, I definitely think that plays a role in this decision.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, because I haven't been a town meeting member the past year or two. So what happens with those are just written reports, and they're given, you read them on your own, and there's no.
Correct.
No discussion.
Yeah, Tony, you make a good point. We haven't, but we did get some reports in the spring. I thought we got reports from the superintendent and from the town manager. Anyhow, it's such a hot topic. And here's the other thing, that there is also, I don't know, there's a warrant article that was a citizen's petition to put a moratorium on 40R, which, somewhere discussion's going to happen on 40R with that article, and I think it's the last article. All the more reason it'd be useful to be able to give a report on what we're doing.
So I should clarify, so you will be able to, town meeting members that are CPDC members will be able to respond and participate in the dialogue related to the citizen petition, but you won't be able to just give your report, and your presentation, which would probably take like a lot more time than that, right?
Well, and that's exactly. Of course, we can respond and partake in the discussion, but it actually puts us on kind of the hot seat to be able to explain what we're doing. I mean, without having the benefit of giving the report, which is an update on the instructional motion. So I know, Julie, it's not your decision, but I think it's really too bad.
So here's a question for you. So there's you all that's on town meeting, right, happen to know that there's I'm sorry,
Citizen petition.
the citizen petition,
This
right?
one's a citizen petition.
So can that be can we discuss that in CBDC as part? We can't, because there's no agenda item for this board to discuss that item, right, before it even comes up to town meeting.
I mean, we didn't put it on, like, specifically on your agenda. We do have 40R bylaw on your agenda, and so, I mean, if you want to talk about it.
I mean, but like, would we?
Right, I know what you're saying.
We're discussing something that doesn't exist.
It wasn't presented to you as a commission.
Right.
It was, I don't know, it was submitted to the town some way or another.
So, it's just it's awkward again, right? The town meeting will get one side of the story, or what the CPDC members that are town meeting members can also provide, but it's not, they're not getting the full, the full dialogue that they would if they did the same thing with an issue with the select board or any other, conservation commission or anything. It's just a very awkward way, because you don't get the full dialogue that town meetings should get.
You want to note Carlo Bacchi has his hand
Sure.
raised.
Ooh, yes, Carlos.
Hey guys, Julie, you don't have to name names, but presentations by boards and committees are allowed, but did you get an email or a message specifically that, because you guys have the right to present a report as a board or committee, so I was kind of curious. And this is an important topic as well, among the citizens petition you mentioned and other things that are going to come up that night. But was it a flat no, you guys can't present, or we'll get back to you?
It was a no, and it was from the exact people it would need to be from.
Right. Well, yeah, but you're right. As town meeting members, we can all speak up on that, and you guys have been the ones taking this on, so that's kind of disappointing, the fact that it's part of the warrant. So I just wanted to get some clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
So we can continue on the 40R bylaw topic, and we have time. Oh, it's 7:58. Oh, wait. No, we have time.
We have about half an hour.
Yeah,
Fill the time.
May I ask, and tell me if I'm straying too far from what we have as an agenda item, but I'm just thinking about this at town meeting. Tony, you and I feel like we have some additional responsibility now, not being teed up for a presentation, but it seems to me that we should be prepared to speak to what was presented in written form as information when the 40R topic does come up.
I agree. I think perhaps and I hate to phrase it this way, but a summary of the report that we've met on such and such day, we plan on meeting in this, we're discussing this, that, and the other thing. And that was a summary of a summary of a summary, but,
Yeah.
but anyhow, something quick and easily digested by a town meeting. And that would probably be one of the second comment after the initial petition is presented and the petitioner explains their logic.
So is it on the agenda?
Yeah, so I can help with a summary if you need something more succinct than like a 4-page report to read at a microphone, or from your Zoom at home. I can help you guys with that offline, if that's helpful to you.
And
I think it would be helpful, and I think that would be the appropriate initial response to the petition.
And we should probably request to be able to speak in that way.
I agree. I don't know if that request needs to be made in advance to the moderator.
So
Probably.
does one of you want to email me that request and I can pass it along to Alan?
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay.
Who's Alan?
Alan Fould is the moderator for town meeting.
Mr. Dave Talbot also would like to speak.
Yes, please, Mr. Talbot, if you would.
Hi all, good evening, how are you?
Good.
So yeah, I think just to, I've been listening to the dialogue about this, and obviously town meeting members do have the ability to put forward citizen initiated articles. It's part of what town meeting can do. And I would assume that the CPDC could have a hearing, or you obviously will have lots of chances to talk about the issues on the floor of town meeting. I think the reason that it was put forward was because there's already been 2 instructional motions, and I think some acknowledgement, including by the board, given that you're going to consider and put forward some amendments for April, as I understand it now. There is some general acknowledgement in the community that some revisions are warranted. And I think the intent behind this was to say, well, we've had 2 instructional motions, and with the year gone by, did not see something, and I know it takes time, but although there's been acknowledgement of some issues, instead it's been at least two, maybe three, maybe four more projects proposed under and probably possibly approved under the existing version, and that there was a need to maybe say, hey, can we pause this? If we all think there should be changes, then let's have the changes before we usher in several new developments. So that was, I think, the thought behind it. Having not seen it come from the board or staff in a year, then town meeting steps in and, does what it can do, what little it can do. As imperfect as it may be, I think that's the perspective there. Relatedly, last night I took some photos down at Sanborn Street, and it looks like there's about 15 to 20 cars parked along Sanborn Street that I can only imagine. They seem to have only come given the Postmark project. It would appear to be connected to Postmark. And so this is just one of several things that we see happening that I'm not sure were anticipated by when the project was approved, that it would fill street parking, from evening around till the next morning. That I say that not knowing whose cars they are, but it's one of the concerns. And if this is happening at one project, and we've got 3 or 4 now, and maybe 2 or 3 more coming, the cumulative impact could be very large, and we're all concerned about parking. So this is for everybody, including businesses and employees and shoppers. So that's just one of the topics that's come up with involving the scale of the buildings, and you've heard about the open space. So anyway, I'm sort of rambling here, but I'd be happy to show the picture. I'd be curious your reaction to any of this, and also to show you the photograph I took. Do you have any insights on where all these cars are coming from? Are they not from Postmark Reading? If they are, does this mean each one of these is going to add 20 more street parking occupations from evening till morning times however many projects it is? And if so, are we really ready for that? So was that part of the understanding when they were approved, that they would occupy that many street parking spaces, or not? My understanding is it wasn't. So anyway, I'd be happy to show the picture if I'm allowed to do that. But I think you all can imagine what cars parked on the side of the road look like.
So Dave, a couple of things. One is, I actually I was out walking the dog, was it last night before last or so, and noticed a lot of those cars parked there. I also saw that there was something going on at what's there on the corner, Masonic Hall?
Masonic Temple.
Masonic Temple. I saw something going on there, which was what was generating all of those cars, because I thought the same thing that you were thinking, Dave, is like, oh, these are all spill off from Postmark. Though, there probably are some cars spilling over from Postmark. Postmark has some specific issues that it is dealing with in the garage that makes the street parking more likely right now. So I wouldn't take what's happening at Postmark and spill that over onto every other development. In fact, I am on the park committee, and we welcome, Dave, for you to participate in any meeting on park. We more people share the misery, so to speak, because parking is just a riveting 5-hour meeting topic.
I was on the park committee 12 years ago, so
and right.
I've tried to block it, but it still comes onto me. Those meetings. But Julie, I don't know, right? There was some information that was pulled together about the number of on-street parking from residents of the different 40R developments, and you probably don't have it at your fingertips, but the summary was that the police did go and did a little survey on whether the cars parked on the street were residents of those 40R developments, and aside from Postmark, they didn't find evidence that residents of those 40R developments were parking on the street. They could have been visitors, but the residents were.
and I think, right, Julie, postmark
Yeah.
was a different issue.
Yeah, so Postmark had definitely the most, right?
Yeah.
Because of the issue they have. And
Yeah.
then the other developments had a couple each, but nothing really out of the ordinary. And then there are a number of plates that ran as out of state or out of town. So, you know, they're watching it, they're keeping track of it for me. So that we can stay ahead of that.
And I understand that Gould Street had some water in its parking area.
Yeah, I don't know that that's impacted the parking that
Yeah.
much though, but.
And Dave, I get the frustration about how long, you know, government takes. And so, you know, town meeting can do what it wants with, you know, the pace of change that CPDC is capable of having, you know, over during a pandemic and open meeting. And so, right, I mean, there's, right, town meeting can make decisions based on whatever sort of, you know, information they have. And if they want to do it with only half the information, that's, you know, it's their prerogative.
I would just, if I may, just one more quick thing. Granted, it's been tough for all of us on boards to do our jobs over the past 18 months. And, you know, the delays, though, have been in trying to move forward with perhaps tweaking the zoning. They haven't pertained to the new proposals that have come in. Those have seemed to be moving quite quickly while we wait for the other process that's slower, which is to review and maybe tweak in sensible ways. I mean, we all know, I was there at the beginning of this, and when this was first approved, it was really all about 3052 Haven, and it was a kind of a situation down there where we wanted to get something done. And I think there is some acknowledgement that it was zoned to a very, very massive degree initially for that project. And having sat through those early meetings, that was the focus at the time. And I think, I don't speak for everybody, but I think there is some recognition of a need to tweak some things. So it's just, okay, so when are we going to get those, and how many more are going to come in, and are we really going to know what the cumulative impacts are until we have 3, 4, we have 7 or 8 of them, and then suddenly when they're fully occupied, we realize we have big problems, and because we didn't slow down a bit and take a pause. I mean, I think you're all doing, you know, great work overall to do this, and it's really a transformation of the downtown. We do this every 200 years maybe, right? So just to slow, you know, a little pause to make sure, are we, you know, to adjust course a little bit is kind of all I think the spirit of this is about. So that's all. You know, no surprises there.
Yep.
We appreciate your comments, Dave. Thank you. Anything else?
So, I mean, we have Mary Ellen here, we have Dave on the screen. We have a little time. We could give like a high level overview of some of the sections that we're looking at tweaking in terms of the 40R bylaw. We can't really get into it in great detail because we pivoted really quickly today when our agenda changed like on a dime. And so these are things we've been thinking about and feedback, they're based on feedback we've been gathering since March. And we can kind of give you a little preview of what we're thinking. Andrew, do you want to do that? And then I did today prepare a little bit of floodplain bylaw language we could also look at if we have time. But the hearing for the public hearing for the amendments to the 40R bylaw will open on December 6th. So this is just like a preview of kind of what we're working on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I'll screen share the bylaw on the screen. As Julie mentioned, we're lining this up for December 6th to open the official public hearing, so I won't get too into the depths and wordsmithing and everything tonight, like we will probably then, but I'll run through it real quick. Starting at the top, obviously the first section is the purpose, and then as we get into definitions, we had some ideas that we could add to or change to. Housekeeping there on the design standards that we had recently updated last year or two, so we can do that real quick. But some of the bigger ones were defining lot coverage, which warrants a conversation because do we want to include things like roadways and driveways and open parking areas and lot coverage, or is it only building and structures, which has typically been the case? And that's how lot coverage is defined in section 2 of the bylaw, and through my review of a lot of other bylaws, it is typically structures only, but again, warrants the discussion of what we would like to see here in Reading. This clause here would make a little more sense as we scroll down, so I'll skip that one for now, but another big one would be.
Is it big enough? Sorry.
Yes,
It's totally good?
I can read it.
Okay,
I can.
sorry. It's just me, as it turns out.
When it's one point type, then we got a problem.
We would certainly like to define open space within our 40R bylaw. It's certainly a definition that we noticed was lacking once these conversations started, because we didn't have it at all. So now it's just a conversation of what do we want to define it as? Is it green space only, or do we want to consider patios and outdoor dining areas and benches that are dedicated to outdoor uses as open space or not? So again, just another conversation we'll be having there. Similarly, we could define recreational uses that we can look to expand on or not, and that would about do it in definitions that we're seeing, but of course we're open to more ideas as we're looking at that section. And then as we get down, we want to make sure we clearly state that open space and recreational uses are an allowed use in the bylaw. We've seen it in a number of other smart growth bylaws that it's clearly identified as the allowed use on a site. But what we don't want to do, and what I tried to explain above when we get into the conversation, is a residential only portion with open space is not a mixed use structure, so that will have to be careful and word correctly, just something I was noting. And then as we continue to scroll down, these are the dimensional requirements where I think we'll have a lot of heavy conversation. Obviously, we'll be discussing lot coverage. Again, how is that defined? And is there a maximum or minimum that we want to look for available sites now? And if we do define a min or max, should the remaining be dedicated open space? Again, how is that defined and what will that go towards? We've thought of things like maybe a minimum lot area might make sense in Reading as we look to consolidate parcels. We have a lot of small parcels in town that come with their own unique challenges when they're being looked to redevelop. And again, looking at setbacks, we were trying to be a bit creative instead of just, residential zone or property. Maybe if we had two
Please sign in.
Mm-hmm.
setbacks.
Sign in. Thank you.
A developer could look to combine them in what makes sense for a site. And that was a unique idea that we probably haven't fully flushed out yet, but again, just looking to get setbacks and how can we get them to be activated. We see setback requirements now that are currently maybe parking or screening or unusable areas and pathways that don't really go anywhere, and that might not be the intent that we want of those required setbacks. So if we can allow flexibility for such, maybe they can connect open spaces or usable pathways. This was something that Tony had brought up time and time again, which was when projects are exceeding density, maybe we have a sliding scale of requirements. So we've been thinking creatively on that as well, of what could we ask for when we're seeing high density waiver requests. We've thought of things like maybe a payment in lieu to open space acquisition or improvements. Maybe it's something like a minimum of 10 square feet per open area for every unit over. Again, just something to consider and some food for thought to think about going forward. Let's see, as we continue to scroll down, some of the other heavy, hard-hitting areas where here, 10.5.7, we had originally thought, I think, based on the conversations I've seeing with CPDC that when 40R was originally thought about, it was thinking first floor commercial, second floor office, maybe third and fourth floor residential. So we thought 50% gross floor area would make sense of commercial space, and then 33% of the ground space being limited to office. Now we see a bit more unique designs that it's more residential and maybe a little less commercial than we thought, but those ground floors are also not always at grade, those commercial spaces. So the way this was worded I don't think meets the goal of what we were looking to do or are looking to do in the future. So it might just be able to be wordsmithed in a way to get what we actually want. As we continue down, again, open space, how can we improve this area of the bylaw? What can we call out and ask for? I think a lot of it will also, in open space, will also be design guidelines heavy if and when we look at that following the bylaw. Some communities have their design guidelines within the bylaw themselves. We did not do that so that we could change it a bit more easily, as you've seen. And then as we continue scrolling, the last major section that we were looking to update was waivers. What do we think we should be looking for as we ask back for waiver requirements and requests? We've similarly come up with some in our mixed use bylaw, which was 2019, 2020, I think. So I quickly pulled those over, but what else could we be looking for? What could be improved upon in what we're asking for? And other than that, I think that's the last major section we're looking at. So I know CPDC hasn't seen this yet to comment and reflect on, which is why, again, I don't want to get too into the exact wording, but those are some of the high level areas that we were looking at.
Okay, do we have anything on community space? I know that we have that for the ACE flats, but I don't know if there are community open conference rooms, that kind of thing that are dedicated.
I don't have that language specifically in here, though it's a good thought that we've seen with ACE and similarly the Chronicle building, who's doing some historical components. When it comes to publicly accessible open spaces versus privately accessible, again, that's another conversation of maybe what would we prefer to see and what counts as open space. Do those second level terraces count even though they're not at grade? How would we work that in? But no, to answer your question right now, I don't have any language on community spaces specifically.
I think sort of all the things that you're targeting here really encapsulates, the discussions that we've had. So, the details are important and right, we'll have those conversations. I do think that, when we do have that conversation, it will be important to sort of understand and maybe we can have some examples of, sort of what's the repercussion of changing, one thing, because I think that's really the thing that we need to grapple with. As a town, what's our priorities, and what does changing one thing on, in these guidelines do? And as we heard from the Economic Forum, was that a couple of weeks ago, you push one area, you ask for more open space, that means you're going to get less affordable housing. You ask for, one thing or another, and so, if the town's priority is open space for downtown, that's great. It's likely that we'll either get two things. One is, less affordable housing or less development downtown, which may be what town meeting wants ultimately. But the other thing is, so where does that development go? If it can't go downtown, where else in town does it go? And sort of like playing some of that stuff out of like what the options are. because we can't get anything for nothing. And so, you know, there's anything that we push here, right, there's a trade-off. So sort of, Julie, sort of thinking that out when we talk through this stuff, I think would be good. Not just what's the minimum open space number here on this, right? But what does that mean in terms of like the typical downtown parcel? What does that give up? How much development square footage does that give up? And what's that likely to do into the feasibility of a development, or where does that development go instead?
Okay.
Does that make, am I just talking gibberish?
Nope.
No, that's logical.
I also, may I chime in? Related to that, something that I grapple with in my imagination is trying to picture something. Okay, we say 10% minimum open space. I don't know if there are any examples that we can point to where this has been done in other towns and what that ends up looking like on the ground. And what I'm thinking of is, you know, a much larger scale, not in the density that we're talking about here, but you know, in cluster development, say cluster subdivisions, different scale entirely. When you require a minimum of open space, you might just end up with open space that actually isn't really attractive or usable and it's not connected to anything. I'm trying to imagine this at the denser scale that we're talking about in the downtown smart growth district. So what does 10% saved as open space look like? And as buildings get built out, how does that actually get pieced together? So are we talking about, I mean, and it's related to even the minimum of 2 setbacks as well. So if we say minimum of 2 setbacks, 10 feet each, if one of those is on the side or the back of the building, do we end up with an oddball mix of walkways or communities ending up with alleyways? And is that a good or a bad thing? Overall, I'm wondering if you've discovered any examples of where things like this have been applied so that we can actually visually see what it ends up looking like.
I have looked at other municipalities and those who require open space very early on during our March workshop. We found a number of communities that actually had limited development when they had open space requirements, or those requirements were getting waiver requested or just not working, even to a degree that one bylaw is nearly rescinded. I won't go. But there are other areas where it has worked. I think Chelsea has been a good example, though it's also a very unique development where the community partnered with the developer and a local nonprofit and received park grants and more to develop the green space in and around a few 40R developments that they had. That's not to say that we can't look to do the same thing, but it was a very unique situation and development there, and a desire from the community for affordable housing, which really partnering with the local nonprofit helped get the style of development that they wanted. And I can look for more information on that and others. I'll try to pull up others.
Would I be able to react quickly to what John just said?
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Those are great comments, John, and well taken. One way is allow some in-kind contributions. So maybe one developer builds the full lot because it makes sense on that lot, but contributes to having relatively more putting open space somewhere else. Like if you had a master plan that said we'd like to have a spot here, you'd have ways for people to contribute to that, and then maybe they could still build 100% of their lot. That's on the small picture. The big picture is, the 40R zone is quite small in relation to the overall downtown. And so asking, well, if this inhibits anything in this tiny little area, where are we going to put it? There's lots of places to put these kinds of developments, just outside of the 40R as you move down, the Sonny's car wash type of area, or going down Main Street, expanding it south of Washington. And I would just put in one pitch, I do not speak for the board that I sit on, which is the RMLD board. But as one board member on that body, I am in favor of looking at what we're doing with that site. I've said that publicly and put a goal on and had the agreement of my colleagues to have a joint meeting with the select board to discuss just that topic of what are we doing with this site. And I recall a couple of years ago, the concept that came out of Cpdc for that area, the imagining what it could be, was actually an extremely low density concept, which surprised me because you're asking, well, where would we put this good mixed use stuff that's close to the train? Well, why would it be so very, very, very low density on that triangle there in concept, as opposed to splitting the difference, if you will? So that's been something I've always wondered about. Why does it have to be packed into 100% of the lots right down the depot where there's no place to sit? But when you're looking a couple blocks away, you want it to be so free and open. So those are just some thoughts, and thank you for allowing me to speak again, and thank you for your thoughts.
Sure, Dave. I do want to make sure that it's known that that plan was not a CPDC plan. That was developed by a consultant working under the Economic Development Director. So that was not a CPDC board plan.
I was always confused where that came from.
Yeah,
There was a big meeting with all the town officials and state senators and everything. So thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and you're right. There are some good parts about it, and some parts that that I'm not sure that. Well, the board really never discussed it, so I don't even know where everyone at the time that was on the board thought of it, because it never came to this board. So.
Eminent domain on McDonald's there. How about that? Let's put something nicer there.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to wrap that up, or are we all set?
I'd like to make one last comment.
Please.
Those plans for the RMLD site and surrounding, that was always pie in the sky because most of what they're developed or they proposed was on property that's privately owned. There's no control for the town, the state, or anybody to force them to do this great overall arching plan. And that's going to be the same with the Sonny's Car Wash, McDonald's, Jiffy Lube, Burger King.
Of course.
There's nothing we can do about privately owned property.
But a lot of the RMLD site is town or RMLD owned. I know you're right about parts in the back of the warehouse.
Thank you.
But just we're speaking conceptually here.
Yeah.
Because all the sites in the depot area are also privately owned. So what do we want our town to look like is what it all comes back to. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Dave, I'm sorry, that's exactly your last comment is exactly the point. Is in past guidance was we want the development downtown, and maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe we want a more rural looking downtown, and we want more development by the highway or by RMLD or wherever. So. I guess my point is, right? Let's have a discussion on when you pull triggers in zoning, you end up doing with some different development. Let's make sure that the triggers we're pulling are the ones that get us what we as a community want, and let's not fool ourselves into thinking that we can pull triggers into keeping the town the exact way it was, 5 years ago, right? Because we are in a perfect location, right? Right off of two interstates, a half an hour from downtown Boston. Commuter rail. I mean, we are this is where housing and development should happen, is in the location conditions that we have in Reading. So
right.
So
and
let's
the tweaks
plan
that
for
Andy
it.
just showed are kind of in line with what some of the community members have been saying for a couple of years. So thank you for starting the work down. I think we're on the same page what the tweaks need to be.
Okay, we're all set on all of those issues?
Yep, we
To
can save
let-
floodplain for the hearing on
We
the
can
6th.
save that for a while. Just for those of you who've come in later, whatever, the next item that's on our agenda is the Chute Street. We have a withdrawal of the minor amendment for Johnson Woods Drive, just so you know. And we also have a continuance, for the Woburn Street, 18 Woburn Street. So if you were interested in those two issues, they're no longer scheduled for tonight, but please keep an eye out on the website if you're interested in those. So we're moving on to the Shute Street, 6 to 16 Shute Street. We have representatives. Thank you.
Good evening. Attorney Josh Latham here tonight on behalf of Plimsoll Company, the applicant under 40R for a redevelopment of the site at 6 to 16 Shute Street on the corner of High Street under the Downtown Smart Growth District as a mixed-use project. This is the third hearing before the board. The last time we appeared before you was October 4th. With me this evening are Jamie Garrity, who's here on behalf of the applicant, Jeffrey Ollinger, he is our project architect, and on Zoom we have Patrick McCarty, the project engineer, and we have Corinne Tobias of Green International, our traffic consultant. At the last hearing, Cpdc had several comments for the project team. We did go back to the drawing board, revisited some aspects of the project, and we're very excited to present these updates tonight. And with that, I'll turn over to Jeff Ollinger. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. All right. Thank you all for hearing us for a third time. So our update tonight, we'll introduce several new features that we've modified on the project, as well as new portions of the project we've added to help respond to the board's previous comments. Next slide, please. So here on this first slide, and Jamie, of course, feel free to jump in case I miss anything. But we want to draw your attention to the additions to retail that we've made over the course of the project. So we started off at about 3,100 square feet. Now we're up over 4,000 square feet, which constitutes about a 32% increase in the overall retail square footage that we've provided on the project. We've also now redesigned the second floor terrace so that we have the ability for the ground level retail to access that terrace, as well as use what was previously a community room. We've enlarged it and made it a more of an event space that can be utilized for multiple different functions, and we can show you more detail on that. We've also adjusted the building massing per Nick's comments last presentation, and you'll see there that we've both provided more relief to the abutting residential district, as well as maintained some of the features for keeping articulation within that facade. We have also updated some of our program in terms of, as I mentioned, some of the square footage have adjusted. We've reduced our unit count to 31 units in this presentation, which is down from 33 in our initial presentation. And we've also modified our parking garage to accommodate that. We've made some what will appear as though minor tweaks to the configuration of the building's core, but we think that we've now both given better retail, better front unit, better trash access, better stair. So there's an efficiency that we've also picked up there, as well as made the garage maintain its functionality, particularly with its relationship of the ADA and the accessible spaces to the garage, to the elevator. And we've also, okay, so we can go to the next one. Yep, we can obviously address as we go through it. So here again, this is a drawing of downtown's, or the sidewalks that are adjacent to our property, showing how our project now will activate a much longer strip of retail along the ground floor. Here you can see an update to the massing. So on the left-hand side, you'll see where we've added access for private space, outdoor space for the retail to access. You'll also notice on the right-hand side that we've pushed the building back even further, as well as still maintained a step in the facade so that we have some relief in terms of material and architecture. Here at the ground floor, on the left-hand side is our plan from the first presentation. And on the right-hand side is our plan as it currently stands. And so you'll see that we, by cleaning up the arrangement of the building core, we've made a better mailroom for packages, et cetera. We've actually cleaned up the retail space to add an additional 200 square feet, and now they cleanly fit into the window bay pattern. We've also moved the trash from where it was in the first presentation now so that it's abutting the garage. And so that now also has access from the second retail via a striped lane that now they can pull their trash over to the garage. So in general, I think the ground floor of the building works really well now. And as I mentioned, we still maintain, a nice relationship of the ADA access to the elevator. If you want to go to the next slide. So here on the second floor again, you can see how we've reconfigured the amenity space. For the residential portion now, we've basically chopped off half of a unit and reconfigured how that's spaced. But that provides a better, more usable, more connected amenity space for the residential. We've then expanded the what was previously the community room into this indoor portion of retail. And all that will be accessed through a stair that otherwise would be a sort of secondary stair to the residential and kind of unutilized. And our goal is also to really design that so that it feels as though it's a part of an active portion of the building, even though it's not technically. Anyways, so we want to make it feel as though it's very much of a continuous design space. We still maintain a nice public terrace that'd be about 1,000 square feet, and we also have terraces for the private units along this level of the building. Andrew, if you want to go to the next one. Here's a comparison of the Chute Street facades from our first presentation to where it is now. And in our first presentation, there were both comments about the articulation of the roof line. There was an idea that maybe this facade was a little bit flat and that the distribution of the materials could have been a little bit more artful in terms of how it's relating to the residential scale of the abutting district. In our new one, you can see that now we actually really have two kind of distinctly different treatments to the building. So it helps to both break down the building's overall mass and its length. But we've also adjusted the roof line. So actually these here are the rooftop units. Those would be screened. But you can see that along what we would call sort of the townhouse portion of the massing, that has a lower roof line. We've also, which I really like the way this works with our unit plans as well, but by insetting and rotating the balconies, it both gave us this like extra dimension of spatial richness along that facade, but then also also allows us to get better sunlight into those units because now they have a slightly more south-facing wall. And so there's a bunch of good things that happened there. The ground floor also stayed pretty consistent, again, with the changes that I mentioned regarding where the trash moved. At the end of the block at this corner park, we've obviously updated that, going from what was probably a good idea to have a tree there with a nice planter around it, but I think this will actually be much more functional what we have now, which will be sort of a more open plan that is more flexible and multi-purpose. Okay. Here is a rendering from Chute Street where you can kind of see just A/B where we were in our first meeting, how we still had the second and third floors bumping out. Now we've taken that cleanly back. And actually, I wish this rendering was showing this tree because I think in a later rendering does have the tree in there. But that tree and all of the abutting property will have a much more minimized or mitigated impact from the development because of that additional setback. If you go next one. So now just to get back in the detail kind of the components of our ground level. So the primary retail space has not changed that much other than like I mentioned, it's gotten larger. It's added 200 square feet by cleaning up this back wall. We still have this nice open front to it. Still have the ability to have an indoor-outdoor kind of event that's off the corner.
Sorry.
And we can go on the next one.
Button's not working.
Yep, there you go. So again, this is subtle update but meaningful. You can see now that we have a significantly larger mail package room than we had in the first one. This will now be large enough for a door to swing in, and they can actually be packages. Have enough recess space there as well for the mailboxes and everything. And it's also kind of subtle, but here you can also see kind of how we shifted the entrance down just another 8 feet, which allowed us to, you'll see on the upper levels, it allowed us to do some good things with the plans. If you want to go to the next one. Here is our secondary retail space showing that this also has the ability to open to the sidewalk. You'll notice here that we have also added a door into this stair from the retail. So we now have the ability to go directly from this ground floor retail up the stair and into the second floor amenity retail space. Go to the next one. This is a new view that you have likely not seen before. Here we're showing it as a kind of yoga function, but this could really be, multiple different things. Jamie has some very interesting ideas about how the ground floor might be able to support a smaller second level, tenant, and there may be some sort of rotating retail concept. I know from recent personal experience over the last 2 years with our office, it has an additional outdoor kind of space to that doubled for a short period of time as an offsite for a fine dining restaurant that did a catering there during the pandemic because they needed the social distancing space. So this last year has taught us, a lot of interesting ways in which you might be able to cross-program things. And so I think doing something like this for the building that has some level of public access through the retail will still make it a part of the public realm. We'll go to the next one. So now these are kind of updated renderings. This view from the track hasn't really changed very much, but here you'll see kind of a daytime view and how we're still trying to work as best as possible with the context while still making a building that has a real identity and presence for the town. Next slide is a night view, and that's just to give you a sense that it'll have a warm glow at night. Here again is from High Street, and hit that one. Yep, and so here again you'll see very subtle updates. Actually, the only part that was enlarged here is just behind this tree, which is a little bump out. You'll likely see on another view, but more or less same as we presented in meeting 2. This is a view from the intersection of High Street and Chute. And here again, you see really this canopy sculpture and how it's still, it has it takes up a fair amount of space in terms of its civic presence, but in reality, it's actually quite thin and allows a lot of transparency through to the retail beyond. And here at night, again, you'll see that it has a nice, this will have a nice kind of iconic image for what the town square is being marked by. And here's a new view along Chute Street. This helps, I think, to provide some additional context. So this is that larger tree that is existing at the corner of our property. And so here you can see that we do, a lot to help to break up the facade as we're marching along Chute Street. And again, I think you kind of begin to see how the train station and what we were describing as a more commercial end of the building begins to adopt a different language as it's getting closer to the public square. Here also subtle, but you can see that we have a truck parked in our garage, and that's because we have a clearance, I think, of 12 feet right now in our garage. So we're designing it with the intent of having trucks loading from inside the garage if possible. And again, these are kind of just by the numbers, sort of updates for where our parking is versus and where our units are in terms of their size. Again, we've had an increased retail at the ground level, slight modifications to the lobby spaces, but other than that, we have not much of an update here other than the reconfigurations I mentioned. Again, this is kind of a redundant. If you want to check, unit sizes, we have them listed here. And say maybe this one's good to point out just in terms of how we've been able to get some 2 beds in here and maintain a healthy unit mix for the project. So On the second level where we took away that amenity space, we actually were able to turn, if you see this 2-bed here, we were able to turn that into a 1-bedroom just by introducing a demising wall right there. So even though we made those adjustments to the building, it actually keeps it still like very efficient, and we have very healthy kind of floor plans for the project that you may have seen in there was a set that we released about 2 weeks ago. Yep, and again, still sticking with this same material palette, looking for a mixture of these kind of patina tones as well as the bronze and wood tones if possible as well. And that's the end of our presentation. All right.
Good. Will we have a chance to see the materials live and in person?
Live and in person, you will. I believe the last time it was once we received the planning approval, then we came back for before our construction documents were being submitted, kind of at 80% CDs, and we were still within the acceptable range of the described materials that we had at the previous one, and then we had the time to study kind of what the different materials are going to be, but absolutely we'll bring them in.
Okay, good. Any questions or comments from the board?
I don't have any.
I think this building is growing on me. I'm sorry?
It's because you don't live next to it.
Close enough. Any other comments? I'm not ready to open it up yet. Any comments, any other comments from the board? Tony or Heather?
See Heather's hand up.
I do, but Tony, if you have some, you can go first.
Last time I'd asked for how much current retail is being, is in the building.
Yeah, so the first floor is about 4,800 square feet, and the basement is about 4,800 as well, but it's a mixture of sort of food prep area, office space, storage. There's no true retail in the basement.
So 96-ish is the total you have.
Yeah,
Okay.
that includes storage space. So the assessor, I think, has about 8,500 square feet of finished space on 2 levels.
All right, so we're basically cutting that in half.
Yeah, I mean, I've invited the board a couple times. I'd love to have you through the building. I think the basement has a 6'7" ceiling with no windows, and very small sort of cut up individual spaces. So I'm not quite sure I would describe it as retail, but again, I guess it's a matter of subjectivity to some extent.
Okay. That was all I had for now.
I have a comment or two, or question or two. Was there a rendering of what it would look like from the houses back behind, from basically the abutters viewpoint?
Yes.
There is, yeah.
There's one, if you go, our new Shoot Street rendering.
There's one, Andrew, do you have more slides behind?
No,
Thank
I'm
you.
talking about the rendering
Yeah,
of basically the
going down.
backyards of the people on Woburn Street.
Yes, Heather, there is. Well, it's right here.
This one.
Yeah.
And that's that's this version right here.
Yeah, correct. So this one you'll see in the previous version we had the 10-foot setback, and then we also had kind of a sawtooth at the bottom. This one is showing the additional 10-foot setback, as well as we now have just two faces to the building.
It's a 26-foot setback
26 foot back.
from the property line.
Yeah.
To those part of the buildings, not to the parking. I was noticing it's like the parking, but that's not a parking structure. Is that open parking there?
Yeah, so part of the parking will be uncovered by the building.
Okay, that's what I thought I saw when you were just going through your presentation. My other comment is on the other end of the building, the tip of the building, where you have the canopy structure. I thought I mentioned this last time. I'm not a fan of that. And here's why, is that the canopy then I think is dependent on probably the operator of the retail operator or the owner of the building to maintain that canopy. That intersection, I think in general, really needs some shade. I actually really preferred the tree. I'm open to the idea of maybe doing something like art or something there, since it is a very public space. The challenge that I find with that structure there is that it actually kind of impedes people from the street walking through and around it. I find it very much oriented toward the retailer. So if I were there, I as a pedestrian would need to walk all the way around it rather than having that open feel of which I thought you were going for with the patio type feel. It opens up toward the retailer is what I'm trying to say. And so it would feel like the public isn't actually allowed to sit there. I think that's the feel that is conveyed, at least through the renderings there.
Okay. So let me jump in real quick. So Heather, we did hear you last time, and this wasn't an intent to ignore you. We had some conversation. So there is a master plan that the town has for this kind of square, for lack of a better word, and it may entail extending the Chute Street triangle out further into the roadway, and then creating a series of traffic calming measures. So I guess my question to you guys would be, I think I'd like to wait to be cooperative with what the town wants here, rather than me build something and then turn around and have to rip it up because the town wants something else. And I'm probably not as involved as I maybe should be, but I haven't really received an answer as to exactly what that plan is yet. So it's up to you guys as to how you want to handle it. I'm certainly willing to do something now. I'm certainly willing to do something temporary now with the intent that it would get kind of amended later. I think the short answer for me is I'm pretty flexible in terms of what the town and what the Cpdc thinks makes the most sense here.
Yeah, and Heather, and then also just what's represented there was sort of just my attempt at like designing something that would be representative of what an artistic looking object at that corner would be. But I think Jamie's absolutely right in that we're open to making this as much of a productive and cooperative part of whatever the civic design of that square becomes.
And I think just to add to that, our timeline would support that, because I think we're a couple years out from starting construction. So my hope would be that would give the town enough time to sort of figure out, what it wants there, and then we could work together to affect it.
Huh, okay. And when you say that, I'm kind of remembering that there was some planning, but I don't know. Julie, Andrew, do you know much about that master plan also?
Yeah, so it's a streetscape redesign that we're referring to as like the Haven High, kind of Lower Haven project that we're working with Beta Group on. And there was a brief presentation on what's proposed at the Economic Development Summit in early October. And so we can share those plans with you all on the Cpdc fairly easily. And but I do think what Jamie suggested probably makes sense.
Yeah.
When in doubt, save the trees.
Yeah, and if there's a recording of that summit, I wasn't able to attend it. I'm happy to go back and look at it. And my last one was also still about greenery. That green wall. Thank you for including in the packet in the materials the example from Portsmouth. The example from Portsmouth, I noticed basically it looked like it was planters. And so would require a little bit more space. It wasn't stuff growing from the wall. So I don't know if we actually yet have an example of something that's basically growing from the wall that was growing in the ground with trellises up, it looked like. I'm a little bit concerned about the amount of shade this area gets. Of course, you can plant shade tolerant species. But I guess I'm not convinced yet, or I guess I'm wondering are you planning to replicate that one in Portsmouth, which it looked like it basically had almost like ground level planters and stuff was growing up, and there was a trellis so that it looked like a wall, but it wasn't quite a wall like this.
Yeah, I think the answer is I obviously probably would not replicate what's in Portsmouth. But I think I need, frankly, to do a little bit more work to understand exactly how we would construct this. And I think that's not a non-answer, even though it kind of sounds like one. I think I'm happy to come back to you guys and spend time convincing you and anyone else that the concept will work. But to be honest, I haven't dug in deeply enough to really understand, other than on a base level, that yes, this can be done. Yes, it has been done. It can be a mixture of ground level sort of soil improvement so that you're not really coming out of a planter, you're coming out of almost like an internal planter that's the base of the wall, if that makes sense. There's a couple different ways to do it, but I think I need to design the building a little bit more to understand exactly how that works from, an irrigation, structural standpoint, all that other stuff. And I think we're right now a little bit too early in the conceptual phase to really understand that. So I hope that's not an evasive answer to you. It's not intended to be, and I'm certainly committed to working with you guys to make it look nice, because that's obviously my goal as well here.
Yeah, I get it, and I do get that. And what's on my mind is, I guess, continued skepticism until I see it. Of
That's healthy.
I've seen this done in really lush areas. I think they're great. It's such a key part of the side of the building that I too just want to make sure that it works in the climate that we have, and with salt on the sidewalk and all of that, so that it looks as good as one envisions it.
Yeah, and as a building owner, I hope you would know that for me to build something that is going to die with salt and look ratty and awful is not really a great result for me either. So I do hear you.
Okay, my other question is actually something that I think hasn't come up since your very first presentation. I thought you meant, and so apologies for that, but it's been on my mind. I think at your very first presentation, you mentioned that it would be built to LEED standards or LEED certified. I can't remember which. And I'm wondering if I heard you right then. And I'm also wondering if what you're thinking about, I think I had mentioned, would there be space to do, how can we get some energy efficiency here, or at least get, really, meet some good energy requirements. And I think I thought, I don't know, can you put solar on the roof? I'm wondering what you're considering for heating systems. Are you considering, or for energy efficiency? Could you remind us what you said you're planning to help kind of build this building to good energy efficiency standards?
Yeah, well, so off the bat, Massachusetts has exceptionally good energy codes to begin with. Our base energy code that was adopted in 2018. It's off the 2015 IECC standards. And that base standard will allow us to meet a LEED certification just on the energy. Now, there's a couple of other things just regarding building design that Massachusetts also requires with regards to continuous insulation and other types of detailing considerations that we have to make that we'll also be doing on this project. We have the ability, we will also need to have heat recovery ventilation and or ERVs, energy recovery ventilation in our project to make sure that we have continuous fresh air, which I know that everyone is really concerned about these days in terms of having really good air quality inside of the building. And then, in terms of fine tuning all of our mechanicals, we want to make sure that we are using the most energy efficient mechanicals possible. With regards to on-site solar, I know that, these are things that are now almost part of a standard sort of Massachusetts development, but we do like to look, in as many places as possible with the materials we're using. I think LEED tends to be more about material tracking and has a few, even though it started off as a leadership in energy efficient design, now it's, got as much of a component about health safety declarations and other aspects of the materials and products that we will be incorporating both from previous projects as well as researching to make sure that we're bringing in the most current standards that we need to meet.
Okay, thanks. And you'll do EV chargers in the electric vehicle chargers in the parking lot?
Correct. Yeah, and most of our projects we will typically design them so that they have the infrastructure available in case that, every single, in case there's more car spaces that want to add those in the future. That's forethought that we put into it, where we will install a conduit so that we can make sure that, or an empty conduit line. Typically, it's how we also will do our solar, is that we make sure that it's solar ready. And so then as the decision about how the roof is leased and other things, that happen to play out usually towards the end of the project are figured out, we know that we've already designed the capacity for the building to accept whatever energy improvements are going to be incorporated.
All right, thank you. That's it. Thanks.
I've got a question. If you have restaurants in your retail space, multiple, where do you intend on putting fans?
In terms of restaurants?
For like black iron or?
Well, just in terms of ventilation for restaurants.
Ventilation?
So I think by code, you have to run exhaust up to the highest point. So we would probably put it next to the elevator and bring it up to the roof.
And if you go to the next plan, actually, Andrew, one second. You'll see we now have
We have a chase there.
We have a chase here as well, and then we have a chase here. So, in theory, we'll be able to bring, and then this retail space here, we may also find a duct or a small duct for the restaurant.
Any other questions from the board? John?
I want to go back to, and I think this is actually the plan that may show it the best. Is that level, if you go to maybe level, the next page? That,
Yeah, it's we have all the plans at the end.
yeah, that one. So, can you bring it down a little bit so we can see the back of the building?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I guess that's as far as you can go. That's fine. So I really want to sort of understand what that interaction is with the neighbor in the back.
Yeah.
So right, you're going to have a wall right at the property line between the parking and them.
There is
right?
one now.
Correct.
There's
So there's like an 8.5-foot fence now that's the neighbor's fence.
it's a neighbor's fence,
Right.
yeah.
And they're already 6 to 7 feet higher than our ground floor to begin with. So it is though that abutting parking property line will have close to 15 feet with their fence plus.
So Chute Street, imagine that Chute Street goes from basically zero elevation at the corner
Yeah.
to a plus 18, I think, at Woburn Street.
Mhm.
And so where our foundation wall would meet the property line, or excuse me, where our parking deck would meet the property line at the residential elevation is about 4 feet below the current grade.
So you'll have a retaining wall.
So we would have a small retaining wall, and then I would certainly offer to redo some kind of a fence. So
fencing.
their fence is effectively going to be like a 12-foot fence from.
above the grade of the parking.
And it would be
Right.
as high or higher than what they currently have.
okay.
But they can't, from their backyard, that fence is like 8.5 feet, so they can't see
Okay.
the existing parking today.
And then in looking at why I wanted to look at this graphic here. So you have so there's a setback,
Can you
right?
pull it down just a little bit more?
I don't think you can.
Okay.
So so there's a dotted line that runs diagonal to the back lot line.
That's our 15-foot setback.
Okay,
right
that's what. Yeah.
there. And then the building was previously set back an additional 10 feet here. And we've kind of squared it off so that it no longer has that kind of angled relationship. And so we have it stepping. So in some parts, like for example here, we're actually probably 28 feet or so away from the property line. And then as we get closer, this is this part here, and then that part right there, we're moving closer. We're at about 24 feet probably.
Okay. That's what I want to understand. Yeah, because I couldn't quite put it all together there. So
Yeah. So that would be the furthest distance from the property line.
all right.
At this point, we'd like to open it up for the audience to participate. If you'd please come forward.
Sure.
provide us with your name and your address.
My name is Ken Nielsen. I live at 14 Grand Street here in Reading. And I have several questions.
Sure.
Where are the mechanical equipment going to go for the apartments? Where is the makeup air system going to be for the kitchen hoods? And the exhaust fan for the kitchen hood? And I think we'll start with that and then we'll keep going.
That's like very valid.
So mechanicals would be on the roof. Makeup air would probably be through a louver somewhere in the plenum of the first floor podium.
It's got to be conditioned.
But it can still be conditioned coming in through.
Yeah, no, you're conditioned to, when it enter air into a building, you have to condition it. You have to air condition it.
I
You have to heat
understand.
it. All right. That is a big unit. It's not a little tiny thing that you put in your house.
Thank you.
And then if you're gonna have a restaurant, you're gonna have the heat from the equipment, you're gonna have the heat from the people there, and the heat from the food. So now you're in a commercial rooftop. So where I'm going with this is you're gonna have 31 units on the roof. For all your retail spaces, you're gonna have commercial equipment with economizers, you're gonna have hoods, you're gonna have makeup air systems, and you're putting them next to someone's house.
Well, there's an existing retail building with hoods and commercial units all over it right now. Plus, there's a pizza restaurant with a full-service black iron hood that's pumping out right next to a residential house. Plus, there's multiple 5-ton units on top of that building. So I guess I understand what you're saying, but I think our condition is significantly quieter than what's existing today, given that all that product is 1990s to 2000s vintage.
It's still very noisy.
It's noisy today, so.
No, it's noisy.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Sure.
First one, I designed the HVAC system.
Excuse me, you have to address these issues to the board.
Okay.
And then
All right, I designed this building.
this building?
I put the air conditioning in here. Right, so I know how noisy equipment is. I've been doing this for 47 years. And I don't care, if you put all those units up on that roof, there's a harmonic that comes up. And when that harmonic is, it's irritating as all hell. So I think you're too close with all that equipment to the residential abutters.
We'll take that into consideration and
And the other question I have
advise
is,
them to
where are
let
all
us
these?
know where that's going to be, what the site light's going to be in terms of from the ground level, because we can't see it with these. We need to be able to know how big these units are going to be, how tall, how wide, whether they're going to impede anybody's access to any patio areas, or if it's just the roof, how they get maintained. All of those questions I think we need to have answered.
And I think we're happy to do that. And I think there is obviously a code currently for noise and mechanical and all that stuff that we would certainly need to adhere to. so.
And we need to be respectful of the neighbors.
Of course.
There's a stipulation in Cambridge. If the abutter finds it noisy, you move it at your own expense.
Gee whiz.
Contractor's expense, not the homeowner's expense, the contractor's expense.
Well, we've now alerted them to that issue, and we'll need the answers as to placement, noise level, decibel, whatever we can provide. And if there are buffers that can be attached to or somehow shielded, I don't know. I don't know from air conditioners, so. But we would appreciate that information, as would the abutters.
And we'd be happy to provide it.
Thank you.
Right,
Good,
thank you.
thank you. Yes. And if there's anybody tuning in, we'll need to get that. We have a tape that's on the floor there.
If you can
Yes.
stand where that little sticky is.
Right.
Because that way
This
picks you up better and then people can see you.
Everyone on Zoom
So.
can see.
Okay, I'm Sue Capola. I'm at 98 Woburn Street, representing 100 Woburn Street LLC. I've owned that property for about 10 years. I previously was at 100 Woburn Street, owned that property for about 14 years. I've been a resident of Reading for 54 years, also own the property at 128 Woburn Street here in Reading. So, few questions. You know, I want to go back to the comment that Dave Talbot made. What do we want Reading to look like? We need to evolve, I acknowledge that. But growing up and purchasing property and living here to improve the town, this particular development doesn't appear to check the boxes. It doesn't fit into the neighborhood, which is a historical area, unlike 100 where the Atlantic was, that building, beautifully built, fits into the area downtown, very historic looking due to the materials being used in the design. I heard this evening about a tree on the corner. What tree? You can't see it in the renderings very clearly. There is already an oak tree on the corner of my property. It would appear, based on what I can see, that that tree would be being removed to become whatever their tree is. I'm not sure, that wasn't clear. So I would like to have clarity on that. The homes abutting this property are all fieldstone. So, blasting, building has high propensity to impact those foundations and impact the structures within the homes. So I'd like to understand what the bond is and what the escrow will be for any damages caused through the construction of this facility. In addition, the debris, the dirt, it's all beautiful vinyl siding. Windows are all new in all of the homes there. How will that all be cared for, presented? I appreciate the offer for new fencing. When you look at 98 Woburn Street, 98 Woburn Street has a 6-foot fence in the yard. These houses are elevated, so the actual increase in the building size with the level, as the last gentleman discussed, 31 additional HVAC units and the noise that will come from that. We have backed up to a commercial building that has been operating, Sunday through Saturday, however, not after 5 p.m. So the noise, the lighting, the traffic flow has been non-existent. It's been a lovely pieces of property to both reside in and live in and enjoy the downtown area. So I'd like to understand, and there was no view of what the lighting is going to look like. I saw it from the depot. I saw it from Chute Street. We did not see the lighting glow from Woburn Street and how that lighting will shine through with the amount of lighting, not just like having another residential home sitting beside you. Okay? That's just a few things so far. Just didn't bring my glasses up. I did also pick up on the comment around the Heather Klisch made on the front canopy and the potential impact to handicapped access due to that and the lack of free flowing. I'm appreciative of the new design for perhaps the extension and interchange section there. I would say to the town, if that's a consideration, why wouldn't developers be absorbing the cost for those changes as part of new development and mixed use as we go forward, just a consideration. I've done a lot of development in my last 20 years of career, and have seen, many renderings that don't actually ferret through. I'm not passing judgment, but I would like to see what this rendering is going to look like more clearly from an abutter's view. That's it for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In which order should we take most of those points, any of those points?
Actually, Andrew, if you want to go back to that last slide, that was helpful.
Yep.
So with regards to the tree that was depicted in the rendering, that's actually this tree that you see in this image. And Jamie, I believe these images were sent to us by Jen Knight.
Correct, yeah.
That tree sits on my property, just so you know.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
on your property.
Yep.
And so, and Jen Knight, I know that she, in our first presentation, brought forward a number of really, good points that we were conscientious of. And so, with regards to understanding kind of what the lot line is and, what is existing, I think in our first presentation, we were showing this tree as though it was still there. And in reality, she was like, nope, that got cut down. And so you can see here, that we've tried to, depict our project as accurately as possible and with how it would appear from, a backyard or, here it's actually from the sidewalk. And my sense is that it is obviously of a different scale from the residential neighborhood. And yet again, it's in the downtown smart growth district, so there's something of a commercial nature to the building and where it's sited relative to its zoning. In our desire to make it look as though it's more of a campus type building, I guess if that speaks to sort of, where it would fit in architecturally in the downtown. But in general, that's, was sort of our design approach, was both to try to, absorb as many of those comments that we had received. As Jamie, we mentioned previously, we set the building back even further to both help with sound attenuation, or any kind of other, issues that may develop from having the building closer to your property. Distance is one of the best things you can use in terms of design.
Am I allowed to comment back?
You can address the floor if you wouldn't mind.
So one of my not understanding and being able to depict from the photos and appreciating the additional setbacks, the parking is above ground, not underground. That parking is limited, cut back on parking spaces as well.
Right.
It's a residential now area with traffic that could be coming in all hours of the day and night. So, and above ground, not just underground. So that's, headlights and other lighting that's coming through. Is the above the ground parking for only the retail? Is that for the whole?
Residential.
Right, the whole building? And just one more thing on the parking is that there's not enough spaces for the number of units. I understood it was a space and a half for every residential unit. That doesn't
A
include.
little bit less.
Okay, a space and a quarter.
1.25.
Okay, a space and a quarter. And then we have retail sitting there. So where is everyone parking now? And that's a concern from 128 Woburn Street, having lived in Reading for a long time with the depot parking. And now, train station parking, all of that. When was traffic flows done?
So we did a full traffic study. The parking is fully contained within the building pursuant to what zoning requires us to do. We're also within 300 feet of Brandy Court, which is, I don't know how many spaces off the top of my head, but it's a public parking area as well. And then, of course, we're adjacent to the MBTA commuter rail parking, which I believe is 1,500 spaces, currently completely unused. Of course,
COVID. That's because of COVID.
I
And,
understand. I'm not.
Don't count on it.
right.
It's $150 a year to park there.
Are they leasing, they're allowed leasing now?
Yeah.
Julie, is that true? Do they lease back parking for residents of the town?
Yes.
The MBTA? Are you talking about MBTA spaces or
The
town owned?
stopped
Town
releasing
spaces.
programs.
The leasing program through the town no longer exists.
Right.
And then I guess, there's obviously street parking, of which we're adding 2 more spaces along High Street. So, short of, I don't know if I have much more of a complete answer than that to you.
Andrew, do you want to go to the site plan that has our the sidewalks highlighted?
Yep.
I think that does a good job showing where we've added the closing up the curb cut for the current parking lot has enabled us to add 2 street parking spaces that'll help to support the retail. Currently, that doesn't exist. And again, I think I don't want to repeat Jamie necessarily, but to his point, our entrance is actually down the street from Brandy Court. So all this parking is completely contained within the property. We have a retaining wall here as well as a fence, and so no headlights should be shining into these backyards because they'll be both significantly lower than those backyards, and then we'll also have at least one layer, if not 2 layers of fence there. And then, you know, as we previously mentioned, this will be where the cars will be going in and out. So this is, you know, a significant distance, and even, you know, we have some commercial between where our garage exit is and where you'll see the majority of traffic flow.
Can I just address?
Yes, please.
So just to address the parking again, at 128 Woburn Street, I have to pay for a residential sticker in order to park in front of my own house, okay? At 10 a.m., it's free parking along Arlington Street, okay? Which is very much in walking distance. It doesn't take people much, you know, too long. And that was all a result of not having enough parking at the depot. This was before COVID, when these rules, you know, parking street rules changed. Thankfully, being in healthcare, the pandemic is soon going to be an endemic, and people will be back
Returning to normal.
and returning to normal. So I don't want to have a house on 98 Woburn Street and a house on 128 Woburn Street, and, you know, having my house on 128 Woburn Street filled with cars and blocked driveways when I'm having to pay to park in front of my own home there. So just parking, I think, is something that the board should be considering very deeply in this particular space. And just for the record, the Knights sold their house.
Yes, they got out of town.
We're aware of that. Thank you. Anybody else have a question from, please? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, just for clarification, so I'm trying to figure this out right here. So, right, your building shows as, you know, 45 feet high with, you know, a 2.5 foot, you're right, the 2.5 foot parapet. What's the elevation? You mentioned it, right? The elevation between, I'm going to say the front of the building, the point of the building, right? What's that elevation versus like the Woburn Street?
Yes,
elevation?
so the front of the point of the building is 0, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And Woburn Street is 18. So, sorry, go ahead.
And right, if your building is 45 plus 2, right, 47, and that's an 18-foot differential, right, it'll end up being.
It reads as
30 feet higher than.
It's about, don't hold me to the exact number, but it's about 6 feet higher than 5 or 6 feet higher than the peak of the roof of the houses at 98 and 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want to understand that, right, is, you know, noise came up a number of times. And certainly if you have if all the mechanicals are at elevation 45 and you have a 2 foot parapet on the top, you know, noise is all about line of sight. And so if that's up at elevation 45 and the top of the houses are at, you know, the peak of the other houses are sort of below that or just about that, you won't have that same visual where they do now, certainly.
Correct.
Right? I mean, you can see from your house, you can see the roof of the building on Shoe Street. And so you get that line of sight to all those mechanicals. So it will be very different. I'm not saying that it won't be loud, but it won't be that same noise from the mechanicals. It might be the noise from cars pulling in and out or something like that.
I would disagree.
Okay.
So right now,
Mind you, I do this professionally.
I understand.
Noise for my job. So.
I understand, and I am in development and built buildings at East 56th and Manhattan.
Right,
and
sure.
a variety of different places around the country and the world. So I get it. but I'll tell you what I experience in this particular house. We do not have noise from that building.
All right.
And the reason for that probably is the building isn't operating at nighttime after 5 p.m.
Sure.
Okay? Where this building will operate 24/7. And it will have residentials, and the humming and all of that will be very different than what's happening there.
I get that point.
Okay?
Yeah. What I was trying to get at is the whole, right, there's also a discussion about all the rooftop mechanicals and stuff, and that's really not
I don't have a problem
your.
with the aesthetics of
what?
what's over there right now, if that's where you're going on the aesthetic.
No,
piece of it.
no. I was just talking about the noise and the visual.
The individual noise, there's been no noise. The biggest bone of contention with that property as it exists today, because there's no noise coming out of it, there's been no
Which you've lucked
complaints, is the dumpster.
Yeah, right. You've lucked
will
out,
be at the other
right? You've
end.
got a laundromat next door and an empty parking lot, right?
It's a
I mean,
beautiful
that's
thing.
yeah. How can you
It's a
live,
beautiful thing.
right? I, you know, for perspective, right? You live steps from a commuter rail commuter rail, one of probably only 2,000 in the country, right? People pay lots of money to be next to a commuter rail, and you've got this, right? Your neighbor is sort of almost a rural neighbor, right? Because you've got a parking lot and a laundromat, right? So not much use. So all I'm getting at is you're in a prime location with what historically has been sort of a neighbor that doesn't create a lot of
Activity.
activity for you.
That's what we all want for neighbors.
That is what we all want for neighbors,
I'm
right?
sure wherever you live in
right,
Reading,
yes.
you
No,
have
that is
that
what
for
we all
neighbors.
want for neighbor. I'm just saying that you're lucky that, you know, that it's surprising that you've been able to be in the location you have been with sort of a neighbor like that for the past, 20 years.
Call it what you will.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for another good neighbor,
Yep.
and I'm looking for this building to be a good neighbor. And I'm trying to protect the value of my property.
I would too.
And, these are rental properties, right? I don't know if you've tried to rent property in Reading lately. Hard to compete against these new buildings that are coming in with all these amenities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's a lot of high-end, not a lot of affordable housing here in Reading. And a lot of people in Reading transitioned out of Medford, Malden, Somerville, right? To have a little bit more of a suburban feel. We're turning into a city.
Yeah.
Which is why I live in Ipswich now.
Were there additional questions from, yes?
We do have Naomi on the Zoom as well as Lorraine Wilworth, if we can get.
Yes, Naomi, please? Are you there?
Yes, hi, thank you very much. Naomi Kaufman, 64 Woburn Street. I have two issues that I'd like to speak to, and one is about the parking. Perhaps a different way to ask the question of parking is, what does the developer see as the increased parking impact or requirement that will happen as a result of the building? I think that the numbers of spaces that need to be accommodated in some way or absorbed into the neighborhood or the parking lots or whatever is perhaps a way to think about that differently than how the questions have been posed tonight.
So Naomi, I think perhaps the easiest way to answer is by an analysis of trips generated by the existing building versus the proposed building. The change in trips during peak morning hours, I believe, and Corinne can correct me, but it's 10 additional trips, which is one car every 6 minutes, which I think our traffic people feel is pretty de minimis. In the afternoon, it's 2 trips, which is one car every 30 minutes. So I guess what I would say is that I think net, when you're replacing a retail and an office building with residential and retail uses, the actual number of traffic trips goes down or stays relatively static, or very, very minimal increase. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, it depends on how a trip is defined. Does that include a park a parking piece of that, or is that just a trip from the building and away from?
It's a trip to and from the
To and from
buildings.
the-
Yeah, so parking,
So they could be parking in your lot?
correct. So parking
Right.
would be 100% for the residential is 100% contained within the garage. I think, and Julie can maybe speak, or Andrew can speak a little bit more to this, but with some of the recent information that the towns received from the 40R projects that are operating, the actual utilization of parking stands around 70% of what was built. So there are a number of empty parking spaces within the garage.
Yeah.
I think
So-
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm not talking really about what is being parked up in your garage. I think the concerns that other people have expressed tonight, and, you know, my question is about what will the street parking and/or parking lot parking requirements demand be? Not the number of trips, not the percentage of parking in your garage, but what will be required on the streets, either because of increased retail usage, which of course we all want, or because people will not be parking in their spot in the garage, but will choose instead to park on the street, perhaps. So I think that's the question, and if you can't answer that tonight, that's great. You know, you can come back to us with that, but I think that extra demand, even though you don't need to provide it because it's going to be in an existing lot, you know, we still need to understand what that volume would be.
Yeah, and I think the answer is that I don't have that off the top of my
Yeah.
head tonight, so.
And I would just ask the select board, the board, to please consider that or ask that of a requirement from the developer to provide, because I think this adds value to the parking discussion that we keep running around with. So that's my first question, and thank you for responding to that. My second question is related to sound mitigation, which I know there's been some discussion already about the immediate abutters and, you know, what the 24-hour sound may be. But what is being done to help make sure that sound is being deflected in the correct direction or away from the neighborhood? So, for example, and I'm not a sound engineer, so excuse my naivete with the language that I use, but on the building rendering, at the top, you're showing some architectural motif or a crown that looks like it's angled downward. And already there is an amount of noise, both from Main Street or even from the highways, that get deflected into the neighborhood because of the newer buildings that have been built. So what is going to happen with this building that's going to help make sure that sound is not being reflected into the community?
Well, I think the easiest answer would be that the building massing is actually blocking the entirety of the neighborhood from the train noise. So I guess that would be an immediate benefit, I would argue, and then I can let Jeff speak to some of the sound, you know, rooftop
And
stuff.
let me just clarify, I'm not even really specifically talking about train noise, because it's more other, either noise from the building itself or noise that gets carried from Main Street and from the highway.
Yeah. So I think with regards to, I think John may, obviously being an acoustic engineer, would have far more to speak on this than I would. But general principle about sound diffusion is that if you have the more texture a surface has, the better it is both at breaking up the reflected noise that's coming off of a surface, and if it happens to also have some softness to that material, it can absorb sound. Our building is really a sound diffuser, for lack of a better description, because of the way that we have these angled articulations along the facade. So that's number one. Something you may be experiencing from some of the other 40R projects, having recently done one of these 40Rs here, is I know that some of those spaces tend to be longer and flatter, and the larger and flatter the surface is, the more opportunity it is to have a more consolidated or clear reflected sound off of it. So when you hear, so our building has a rougher texture to it and therefore will diffuse the sound much better. Actually, that 3D view of it, yeah, that's a good view of it in terms of what's happening along Chute Street. Similarly, along High Street, the building steps back, so we have changes in elevation as well. So there's a number of things that the building does, both at sort of the scale of the balcony and the scale of the townhouse, I guess you could almost call it, that townhouse bay. And then also, as Jamie mentioned, there's really a macro effect that the building has for the town, which is that it provides a very large amount of building mass that helps to separate noise that may be coming off of High Street, or even if there's sound coming off of Chute Street or the train or around the train station, this building will help to block it.
Good to know.
So thank you for that. That actually helps a lot. I really appreciate it. Do you have a way just to know what the current noise deflection capacity is compared to what your building will provide? Is there a way to even articulate that?
We could, I'm sure we would have to work with an acoustic engineer on it, but the short answer would be is that
Zero.
The current building actually is low. It's made out of brick, which is very hard and deflects sound. It also is very flat and long. And so the fact that to what John mentioned earlier, that there's more line of sight from noise sources that would be either in the parking lot of the existing building or along the street. The current building has very little ability to either absorb, diffuse, or deflect sound in a way that would be beneficial to residents. Our new project has a lot of texture to it. As you mentioned, even the way that our cornice is, that would deflect sound back to the street. So in a way, that's also helping to contain noise. And then not to mention the glass bays will also help to articulate noise. So there's a lot going on with this building that I think both architecturally looks very nice and has a lot of beautiful lighting effects to it, but does a lot of work to help minimize and diffuse sound that is unwanted.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the board for allowing me some time.
No problem.
On that, my concern actually, I have two concerns related to noise on this, and it will do, you're absolutely right, it'll do wonders for the noise levels on the neighborhood back up on Woburn Street, because just the massing, it'll create that barrier. My two concerns is sort of what you said, is the reflection of you've got great articulation there, but it is a totally reflective surface, even more reflective than brick or any of the other surfaces, and it's really more about the and especially with the angle of the cornice there, of it all reflecting back over onto Lincoln Street. The noise of the idling locomotive, which is the noise, right? It creates the most decibels and is the biggest ongoing issue there. So that is something that we probably want to think about, but also for the future residents of this, right there in direct line of sight, straight, there'll be, their bedrooms will be over top of a idling locomotive. And I would, hope that the windows that you include in here have, really high SDC level, and, or else, you're not going to be able to rent them at all,
I'll be living there.
Yeah. So.
All the more reason to see the materials.
Yeah, and I think the fact that this is a market rate, or that there's a market that's going to have to. This building's going to need to be successful, and people are going to want to live in it. They're going to need to want to live in it in order for it to be successful. And so we can't have noise be an issue for the building, or else the building won't be successful.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mary Ellen O'Neill, 125 Summer Avenue. I just have two areas of comment. One is, I was pretty shocked when I saw this first. This is an improvement over what I first saw, but there's something to me that I think it does not respect what Reading is. And I like innovative thinking, but Reading is one of the oldest towns in Massachusetts. And I'd like an updated, more, New England style. This, to me, looks like I'm looking at California or Florida. And I just think it's going to turn out, it looks messy and cluttered, and to me, it's going to become an eyesore. I think one of the changes that could be made is to change that ocean blue to something warmer and more New England-y than something that really doesn't belong here. And I just preference, but I think that flare looks horrible. That's just me. I think it looks silly, and it just doesn't really fit. I mean, again, I'm open to something new because we have a lot of the same kind of look downtown, but this just goes so far the other way. The other thing I wanted to mention, so I would hope if it stays like this, you look for a warmer blue and not an aqua ocean blue. It just doesn't fit. And that was one of the best changes down at the old Atlantic, which in the front looks great. The back is just a flat wall. It looks terrible. But they started with a salmon color that many people were complaining about.
Oh, I objected to
Right?
that.
And that went blue because it didn't really, looks much more fitting with the blue and the gray. The other point I wanted to make was 10 to 15 years ago, there was a beautiful tree on that corner. The town took it down. I don't know if there's a sidewalk easement over there or what, but I think that's where a tree belongs. I think that whatever that little it looks like unfinished construction, and I think it's a silly, again, it adds to the clutter and messiness of this. That's the impression I get from looking at this building, I'm sorry. And it just adds to the clutter. And I've been very concerned about this whole area because it has really become a heat island down there. There are no significant trees. We need a traditional New England shade tree there that people can sit around, mingle around, talk, bring some food out and sit around benches and chairs. And it would really add and reduce some of the heat we're just going to be facing. We've got a lot of asphalt, very few, no tree coverage down there at all. And I think that's a good way to start to make that a much more pleasant. And you want to draw people, and people are going to stay, more people are going to stay outside. That's not going to change, I don't think, from the pandemic. So that if we could make it, just nicer and an enjoyable place to be, where the temperatures aren't going down. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
We also have one on Zoom.
One on Zoom, we'll get Lorraine, you
Yep.
said? You got her next. Yes, hello.
Hi, I'm here for Val and her husband. They're for.
No, but you need to say who you are.
Oh,
where
I'm
you
sorry,
live.
I apologize, I've never done this before.
That's fine, please introduce yourself.
My name is Linda Mason. I was a Reading girl all my life. And I've been trying to get back in Reading. I am on a low-income housing, and I cannot really, I've been trying for at least, about 7 years now I've been telling you? Yeah. About 6, 7 years to come back to Reading, because this was my home, and it always will be my home. I mean, I have moved around a lot over the years. I just recently moved to Hill Street in Stoneham. It's a beautiful place. It's really huge. But like I says, I'm on a low income housing. I work at Market Basket. I work part-time, and the rents are so high. I mean, really so high. They just took North Ave in Wakefield. They just took an office. They turned it into a luxury apartments. They're over $2,000 a month. I can't afford that. So my question is this new place gonna accept low-income housing, or are they gonna do a lottery per chance? Because the railroad track where the old
Joyens.
Yes, where they used to be. Yes, I tried getting in there. I had no luck. So my understanding, what you're telling us, that you're going to have restaurants in this building. Am I correct?
That's
Potentially.
open for discussion.
Okay.
Potentially.
So we all love Val and her husband. We all love them. They're kind. they're sweet. If I go in and say, Val, I'm sorry, I have no money today, Linda, don't worry about it, you can take care of me later. These are good people. A few years ago, there was a gentleman that worked for Market Basket. He ended up in a wheelchair. Val was kind enough to have everybody, if they had a buck or two, he left behind a wife and 3 kids. So everybody donated to help this family out. And just recently, there was a painter that just had an accident and he can't work no more. They were kind enough to have everybody, hey, you got a buck or two? Put it in the jar. So this is how kind these people are. And you can't find people like that. So where are they gonna go? Where is their business gonna go now?
All right, Linda, let's ask the first question, which is how many low or moderate income units will be in this building? And how will they be appropriated or lottery or whatever?
Certainly. So Attorney Josh Latham on behalf of the applicant. So the first point, there will be at least 8 affordable units within this project. They will be 80% area median income. They will be subject to lottery. They will be subject to all necessary state requirements to be added to this town's inventory as subsidized housing. As to the second point, this is certainly not a referendum on the Last Corner restaurant. This is a property that's been there a long time. They have obviously been their tenant a very long time. None of this potential development is meant to be about trying to evict them in any way. As we've said several times, we certainly honor that lease. Thank you.
So you're gonna actually you're gonna put Val and her husband somewhere in this building.
No, that's not the point. When the construction happens, it'll be free and clear. They'll start from ground level or a little bit lower and then build up from there.
Oh, okay.
So
they're not gonna lose their business.
Oh, yes, we are. Yes, they will.
They will.
Right.
Maybe we can let the applicant
Yes.
answer this.
Thank you. If I could clarify, there is an existing lease. That lease will be completely fulfilled. There is no intention to do anything to violate that lease, to break it early, to do anything to force anybody out. My client intends to fully abide by their legal obligations under that lease to the Last Corner restaurant.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
because
we
like
got
I
that
said-
clear.
Yeah, because.
And that's an issue that's being addressed.
It'll be settled.
It'll be settled. So that's,
It'll be settled in the courts?
yes,
It will be.
so we're all clear on that one.
Okay, all right, because, like I says, when I just got wind of this yesterday, so,
We've been dealing with this particular project for 3 meetings
Since August, yes.
since August, right? So it's had a great deal of attention, and we've made some changes on the plans, which we have yet to approve.
right,
So that's where we are right now.
okay. Like I says, these are good people, and.
We understand that.
Yeah.
We
and,
understand. We're cognizant of that.
Because I try to go to get their lunches as much as possible because my schedule is,
No, I hear you. We have our favorites, but thank you very much.
okay,
We
thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, we've got somebody on the horn here. Lorraine? Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have 2 questions. First of all, I think the architect is the same architect from 24 Gould Street. And this is an important question, so, where are the parking lot mechanicals going to be, in particular, the massive 6-foot fan that emits carbon monoxide?
So the 24, answer.
Are you all set, Lorraine? Was there a follow-up question on that one?
Wait a minute. What was the answer?
We haven't gotten that
Is
yet.
that your full question? Sorry, I think I cut you off. I apologize.
The second question is, I actually wanted to, ask Oh my gosh, I can't, I'm looking at my notes right here, there's so many. The sound diffusing, I wanted to know, like, who would make sure that it doesn't happen, because the echo that John Weston was talking about, and he actually mentioned in 2017 for the building behind us, but in fact, we do have this big, huge echo problem with sound from the neighborhood and everything, not the train, which is funny. The train is nothing compared to the sound that deflects off the building. So, I mean, can somebody like make sure that's not going to happen to these neighbors? And honestly, I'm only on this meeting so that this doesn't happen to these neighbors, this crazy parking lot fan. I just want to make sure these neighbors don't deal with what we're dealing with right now.
Yes, understand.
Yeah, so the 24 Gold Street Ace Flats garage exhaust fan is a particular case in that garage has 69 spaces and it is almost entirely enclosed. And when they were fine tuning the carbon monoxide sensor for that project, before it was optimized, it was kicking on more regularly because of just the nature of the way that garage was, et cetera. Since then, I believe and Lorraine, you can obviously tell me because you hear it every day, and then secondly, that fan is also mounted in the second floor courtyard. So it's line of sight, directly in the line of sight of Lorraine's house. We discussed this during planning, that this was going to be a feature that we would have in the courtyard. But that being said, we built an enclosure around it, et cetera, to visually screen it. But I know that building owner is actively working to mitigate that. And I believe the other solution that they have introduced is that they're considering adding a secondary fan to improve the ventilation out of that garage so that fan is used less. Now, again, that project is significantly different. It has almost twice as many parking spaces as what we have in this new project. And then also, that project, as I mentioned, is almost entirely enclosed as a parking garage, whereas this parking garage will be significantly open. It'll be open along the entire abutting lot line length, and then we'll also have a ventilated screen wall that's running along chute. And so those two things combined mean that we're going to have a ton more open space for ventilation than we did at 24 Gold Street.
So you won't have a big fan is what you're saying?
Yeah. We will likely have a small fan, but it will likely also be on the rooftop of the building, which would be a different, obviously. And then again, with regards to building design, to go back to kind of sound diffusion, I believe that adding balconies to a project, especially in like a courtyard type of scenario, that those balconies do a lot to help diffuse sound as well. So the fact that 24 Gold Street does not have any balconies, which was also, part of the conversation. So that actually means that we necessarily had flatter walls to those courtyards because of that concession.
I actually was really trying to make sure that you showed everything on the plans, because you are wrong, because we didn't talk about that fan at all during the meetings, and it wasn't on any of the plans. So that's my issue now, and we're dealing with that. It wasn't anywhere. We never talked about it. That would have been a huge point of an issue for us. The sound deflection that I'm talking about is the one that John Weston said. It actually deflects sound from the street, not just the giant fan that sounds like an airplane. That's that's an entirely different noise in itself. That's that's crazy. But this this is a silly thing, but across the street at Tread, which is probably the same distance as it is to Chute Street that it is to my house, they were having an outdoor class last May, and their music was bouncing off the back of the building and out into Green Street. And I was having a yard sale, and people were asking me to turn my music down. And in fact, Tread's music wasn't even that loud. it was just bouncing off the back of the building. It was bizarre. And I don't know why I didn't address it back then. I didn't think there was anything you guys could do. So I don't think that balconies would take all that sound. I mean, there's furniture on the back there. I have no idea. Maybe they can add things.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
they can add.
that's kind of another question. And I'm curious to know, I know that in the last 2 weeks, they've now installed planters with soil in them that are raised off of the ground. In that courtyard, they've added a lot. Has that, anyways, but again, that's not this meeting. That's not this project.
We'll get that on the agenda at a later date.
I guess just to round that out though, I believe that your comments right here, as well as comments we've heard, throughout this process, these are all being incorporated into this new project so that we can learn and take the very best things that we've been able to get on the other projects and bring them into this project so that this is a really successful development.
Good, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone?
We actually had a question while we're on sound. Naomi asked if sound levels will be checked or monitored after the build, and then Sarah Brutalacchio has her hands raised.
And so, yes, again, there are obviously building code requirements for sound attenuation that we'll be respecting, and any monitoring of sound can be done post occupancy to make sure that the building's performing as we intended.
Anybody else here have an additional question or comment? No, you're all set?
You said what we wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to repeat it, but you know how we feel.
We do indeed.
That we will be here every meeting.
We appreciate
appreciate
that.
that.
We will always
Yes,
listen, you
yes.
know that.
Yep.
I do want to say actually
Just one-
oh,
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I may not sleep in Reading, but I live in Reading. That's all I have to say, because there was a
Understood.
comment the last meeting, someone said, because I listened to it after at home on YouTube, I sound like my mother on the YouTube, but on YouTube. And a comment was made, I'm not saying who made it, that they're not even residents. Well, we may not be residents. We
live
do
and
pay
breathe
some
here.
taxes to Reading.
Yes.
But we live in Reading. I sleep in Wilmington. That's all I can say. And I love Reading and I love the Reading people. They've been very good to us.
Good. That's good to know.
And I will be here next meeting.
John?
on the last comment about measuring noise and making sure that they comply with standards. Really, I think it's important for folks to understand, right, that we could put something in the requirements to make sure that they adhere, but it really can only apply to like their rooftop mechanicals or the noise that are bouncing off from the commuter rail, right? There's got to be a source. So they wouldn't even be able to model and tell those sorts of issues like that was being discussed about, about the music from tread bouncing off and hitting, or like what Lorraine said about, some of the other sort of less, more community noise that happens to bounce off. The levels are so low from a 24-hour perspective that you might be able to hear it once here and there, or maybe every day when someone makes that noise. But we can't. It's not something that we as a town really can legislate, and it's actually nothing that they can. Those sorts of things, they can't even model it. We could hold them up to a standard on rooftop mechanicals, but that's about the best that anyone can do. I just wanted to make sure that there was not some expectation that this board had an ability to do more than anyone can do.
Is there materials, you brought up the materials, is there a materials adjustment you could recommend based on the texture of it to bounce things off?
Yeah, there are, right, different materials have different, different reflection, reflection coefficients, and, you know, this actually, it reflects quite a bit. The articulation helps, so between the two, it's probably gonna be, I'm gonna say, a normal reflection between having something that's pretty reflective, but then lots of articulation. If you stand, I will say, right, if you stand in the exactly wrong spot, it will, you know, it will reflect right to your ear and be pretty loud. But where that wrong spot is, you don't know. It depends where the train is. It depends where the car is. It depends where that radio speaker is. So I know that's not a good answer, but it's sort of the nuances of noise. And
But I think that we can be conscious of, you know, as we detail the building, if there's things that we can do to help acoustically deaden the building. I know that even, you know, the way you attach a facade has implications in how hard the system is, and, you know, there may be, so I think that we're very conscious of the sensitivity to sound and noise that may be generated from the building.
Sarah's online.
She is.
Hi, this is Sarah Brucalacchio, 48 Maple Ridge Road. I just had a question about the calculation of the area media income. What is our 80% of the AMI, and how is that used to determine the rental rates?
Okay, I mean, I can sort of explain. I don't remember the exact 80% area median income off the top of my head. It changes every April when HUD reissues their like certified numbers, and the HUD region that we're in is pretty expansive. I think it goes from Quincy all the way up to like southern New Hampshire, and incomes in this area are generally higher than they are across the country. So like 80% is not actually 80% of 100% area median income. It's kind of a strange mathematical pretzel. But basically, to qualify to live in an 80% area median income apartment or condo, you need to prove that you make a certain amount of money to begin with, but not too much. And what they look at is they want to ensure that someone who lives in one of these units is not paying more than 30% of their monthly income on housing, right? So they'll take the 80% area median income, figure out what the 30% number would be, divide that by 12, and then, you know, that's how they come up with the basic rent. So there's a lot of other things that get factored in. There's certain things that can count in that number and certain things that don't, such as utilities, condo fees, things like that. But that's like the basic gist of how that math works off the top of my head.
If I may, just to build upon that, so one key takeaway is we obviously don't establish what the 80% AMI is. That's established by DHCD, and it's a state level determination. And so certainly we simply follow what the regulatory guidelines are. There would also be a regulatory agreement that would be recorded for this property that would include a third-party monitoring to ensure that all the affordable housing was appropriately selected and adhered to over the course of the project. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, please.
I just have a quick question. I think you just about the affordable housing. So, and forgive me if I'm asking this the wrong way. Are we talking 40B or Section 8? Will there be Section 8 available in here? Because 40B is completely different than Section 8. And what I'm hearing sounds maybe a bit 40B, but I'm not too sure. And I think we really do need some Section 8 availability all over Massachusetts. Just a question.
Okay. Julie, do you want to address that one?
We'll do
Sure.
I'll do one part, you can do another
Sounds
part.
good.
Okay, so this project is a 40R project, and the units that are within this project follow the 40B guidelines. So they are aligned with 40B in that regard. I do also believe that these types of projects can enable people with Section 8 vouchers to live in them.
Yeah, and just to build on Julie's explanation, so 40B is a very different statutory provision providing for a very different way of building projects. Reading has met its 10%. We are not doing a 40B project. 40R is meant purely for smart growth, especially in this type of an area, right across from commuter rail. The idea is that the affordable component helps the town stay ahead of that 10% number. And so certainly we meet all those guidelines so that these units would be added to the town's inventory to help stay above that 10% number. And Section 8 is actually a unit by unit type application. So Section 8 would be available if the owner of the property was willing to accept that and work with the state to take Section 8. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? None being heard?
Just want to make sure, Sarah and Lorraine, you both still have your hands raised. Are you guys okay?
Oh, well, I did have a few other things I was gonna say that kind of.
This is Sarah, right?
I was gonna say that the point that Naomi raised is one that's come up. I'm also on the park committee and trying to figure out, how many cars do we need to park downtown Reading? And I think that's a figure that is like a mystery. You might have enough. You might have parking inside the building, but you don't know about who's going to be visiting and where are the employees of the businesses going to park, how much will that overflow be? And then when you multiply that times all the other buildings and, the streets that they're sharing and there's only so many parking spots in Brandy Court. So I think it's important that we get those, we get those figures, we find out what those figures are. And I also wanted to thank Mary Ellen for all of her excellent points that she raised because, they're all similar points that I share pertaining to like the color and the look of the building and the great need for heat relief downtown, things like that. So, yeah, and I also appreciate Sue talking about all of the issues too, and I'm sad that the Knight family felt they had to move. Hopefully.
I think, right, I'll say that I think that getting an exact number for the parking spillover at this point in a building's development is really not possible. And I'm gonna put a example out there that I think everyone can understand because it changes over time. The building that Dunkin' Donuts is in on the corner of Main and Washington, right? Dunkin' Donuts and Jimbo's roast beef, right? There's I don't know how many parking spots are out there, but what? 10 maybe out front. Pretty much anytime I go by there or even try and, they're used frequently, right? Probably not enough parking spots. There's a couple out back. Those get used too, right? Probably not enough to accommodate those two uses right there. So we would say in that context, those two businesses are spilling over, right? People who want to go to Dunkin' Donuts and Jimbo's are taking up some other spots somewhere else. Now, I know this isn't exactly what happened, but remember Kabloom was there. And, Kabloom was when Jimbo was, in the same space as Jimbo's was, but let's imagine that it was Kabloom and Jimbo's. You know what? There would be plenty of parking in that lot. Not that those two businesses are not doing well, but the in and out, the pace at which, how much people park, how, that thing, the turnover there is different. So, and the reason why I bring that up, it's an example that we can all sort of understand, and a pretty severe example of, it all depends on what type of business goes into these retail developments, on what type of parking demand there is. So there can be some, different retail businesses have different parking demands, and it could be a sleepy retail, very vibrant, very successful, but not require too much parking, or it could be something like a Dunkin' Donuts. I don't think that's really what's going to go in there, but that has that like constant turnover and constant demand for quick turn parking. So it's really hard to nail down, a parking
Allocation.
a parking allocation until you actually know what the business is, and that may change over time. The way that I think about it, and this may or may not be right, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about parking because I am on the park committee with Sarah, is that there's going to be whether you believe or not that 1.25 spaces are right, that's what seems to be the evidence, at least right now, that's appropriate for the residential parking component of these. But right, what we have here is about 50% less commercial space than is there now. That's what is being proposed. If you do it on a square footage basis, even though I just said you can't quite do that, but that's what we have to work with. If you do it on a square footage basis, that means that we need 50% less parking from that commercial space. But then there's also those commercial spaces that are there now that are going to go away. So you sort of got to do all of that math, a lot of guessing, right, on how much does a laundromat use those, use those spaces. And I guess my point is that we never will come up with an exact number that says this will, require, 10 more spaces out of Brandy Court. You just can't get there from where we are.
So with 2 retail, it's going to be more than just the 2 additional spots from the curb cutout.
Right.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Because right now, the parking lot is for the residents primarily.
Correct.
And
Right.
they'll have visitors presumably and whatnot. And so even if each restaurant or each place there has just 1 employee, you've used up those 2 extra spots.
Correct.
We understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that would be true no matter what the retail business was,
Exactly.
whether it
Right.
were CPAs who would need to be in the building all the time, or whether you've got ebb and flow with somebody coming.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult, and I commiserate with people on the parking, because short of standing out there and saying, where are you from, why are you parking here, how long are you going to stay, and doing that every day, you're not going to get any flow of traffic or any parking utilization information. There's just no way you can.
But we do know, if we looked at pre-COVID, and we're looking at now, there's really no retail parking except for 2 spots for that particular building.
That's true.
That adds to the parking dilemma. Because right now,
We
that
know.
retail space has a whole parking lot of designated parking to enter into those retail spaces.
Yes.
And that parking, as it's planned, is for residential based on 1.25.
Yeah, but it's gonna be
And
2
then there's
cars.
guests and there's
Two
the.
please weigh in on that.
Thank you. Attorney Josh Latham for the applicant. I just want to make a couple of salient points about parking. Demand in the downtown is a good thing. So we complain a lot about parking issues, and rightfully so. We all want to park quickly and be right in front of the place we're going to. I've been in the downtown a very long time. My building has 0 parking. Venetian Moon wouldn't exist. Bunratty's Tavern wouldn't exist. All of these places that we consider destinations would not exist because they do not have parking. So the purpose of this 300-foot distance to a public parking lot was meant to foster commercial development in the downtown. 40R is meant to foster commercial development with a symbiotic residential use, a captive patronage that will use the commercial use, that will rebuild the downtown. So while parking may be a negative thing, there's a flip side to that. It is progress, it is success for those local businesses in the downtown. So while we may be talking about a net loss of parking, we're actually talking about potentially thriving business that will be using public parking, bringing more people downtown, and really improving, which is part of the master plan. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you.
Can I speak one more time, Pam? I just want to say, I'm on the park committee because I'm all about trying to help what's happening downtown, downtown's very important to me. I just think it's important that the 40R and the mixed-use buildings aren't taking a bigger bite out of what existing parking we have now, you know, from every other need for parking. So it seems to me like there has to be data somewhere as to when you have this many units, you know, you're bound to have an overflow parking of, you know, 10% or something. And I just think that should be part of the equation when we're planning for parking. It's really difficult to be planning for, you know, forward thinking when we don't have all the data that we could, you know, that must be out there somewhere. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, please.
I'm not anti, you know, building new buildings. I just think that we all have to look at the equation of parking. Everybody, you know, has to share.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Attorney Josh Latham, just a final point on this, and I don't mean to belabor it. So if we looked at the as-of-right development within the Business B district, this site could sustain a 3 to 4 story commercial building, entirely office. It would probably take over 25 parking spaces with absolutely no obligation to provide any on-site parking, and that's an as-of-right use. Certainly, this is an archaic element of our zoning. I understand that it's something it's difficult hodgepodging and Frankensteining zoning over many, many years. 40R, I think, is a very smart way of addressing this issue because it provides the residential. We know that we have 39 parking spaces that we can provide on site. That's the 1.25 calculation. We know from experience presently that there tends to be some additional spaces available within that lot. These are unbundled spaces. That means that we could find that we can start dedicating some to employees of the retail industries, that they can actually park within the garage. And so just hit that point.
Which we don't have a provision for currently with most of our 40Rs. Good point. Any other questions or comments? Anybody else holding up their hands?
Oh, sorry.
Just one question. Will there
Yes.
be a response to my question on escrow or bond for damages to the property? I didn't get a response on that.
No, I don't know.
Potential damages?
Attorney Josh, just to answer, we will follow all construction performance standards required. Of course, if there's a bond requirement, we would meet that requirement. I believe that's actually pretty much general construction standards.
There is. The answer is yes. They'll address any of those concerns before, during, and after. Okay, you ready to close discussion on this?
I guess I'm not exactly sure where we stand. I don't know.
I don't know if you saw the town engineer's input.
I did not.
No.
I think he would like to connect with the applicants on maybe.
That we got answers on, or I just want to make sure that we did. The family that apparently moved or sold their house, right? They had a whole lot of questions that I think were all.
Concerns were setback, which she wanted 20 feet, we're more than that.
Yeah.
She didn't want balconies facing her, so we took those away. We decreased some of the window sizes, so made them a little bit shorter. And then we angled the building a little bit so that it wasn't looking directly into their building. And then there were a number of construction, most of which actually have been raised here with sound, with dust, all that kind of stuff, and that would all be part of the construction process. So I'm happy if you guys need a more formal written response, I'm happy to do that.
I guess what do you think?
I'll go through it again and just highlight anything in the decision that
wasn't
that
wasn't explicitly okay. That'd be good. So I guess what I'm thinking is, right, so the next meeting will need to go, right, hopefully that you'll have a meeting with the town engineer and go address any of his issues.
And I'd like to see materials at the next meeting as well. I'm gonna put my hands on them. I'm gonna talk to them.
Yeah, let them bounce back or not.
The next meeting.
Yeah, so the way that we did it before,
We did it after.
we did it
when we got
after, so we
closer to-
conditioned, right, because the building's gonna be building, right?
Right.
And if we have issues with the materials, then typically you can change colors and material types and stuff.
I specifically remember
afterwards.
that meeting for Ace Flats, and it was productive because there were some things that we were doing with the detailing that Nick didn't like. There were some things with the windows that we also, adjust. There were things that were, still very much part of our design development at that time that we were able to address, and that at that meeting was a really meaningful one because that was also, I think, important for developers because it sort of set in their mind what were the, what was set in stone, no pun intended, in terms of where we had to go with our, from a material specification side. It's also very helpful to have that meeting before bidding or just before we're getting into our CDs, because at that point we've also been able to sort of obviously match the budget with the ballot, but then we're also working with you to make sure that it's what the town wants and it's still in alignment with what we were agreed to at planning.
So that way it gives them a little bit more time to get into detailed design, but not so much that you went too far and can't adjust. So.
And I want to say we came back twice.
What?
I seem to remember we
I think you
actually had
did.
2 meetings.
I think you
We
did.
had
so.
one,
Yes.
we had one, and then they said, and that's exactly the
Right,
the
you did
process.
one on some materials, but I think you came back on windows.
Yeah, we came back on windows.
And there were some slight changes, some like modifications to the building as well, in my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, the organization, the interior was also, well, actually we had it, planning didn't work actually honestly nearly as well as this building does at this point. So this building is, in terms of its configuration, I think is much more solved, I think at this point than where we were with Ace Flats at that time. But I know that the organization and the configuration of the units is really in a good place on this project. And so I think that in terms of, the next, what our pre-construction presentation would be very much about having an open dialogue with you about where we are with the materials versus what we're achieving with acoustics and visually, all these things.
Yeah, and I guess to Heather's point, I think that's her up in the little corner up there. Sort of solving out. I don't know if we Heather, if we want to, or if you can solve out the issue with the screening and the live wall. Before or after. I mean, it needs to be some sort of screening. And we know we want it to be, what you want it to be. And you need to do some more homework, right, on whether that's possible or whether you need to pivot.
Sure, so are you asking that we come sooner than later?
Well, I just don't know, right, talking about where you're gonna be ready in the
that feels like
development scheme. The
Yeah, no,
sooner is the better, but we don't want it so soon that you're gonna promise something you can't do.
Yeah.
So I think right now we definitely have a clear kind of design intent and a concept of what we want it to be. But I think as Jamie's already pointed out, that's definitely something we need to get researched. I think we want to get experts also, maybe landscape and horticulture experts that are giving us the right advice in terms of what species to use and these other kind of sensitive questions. And that, in a funny way is also kind of like a construction document type of question where similar to, these are the materials we want to use, these are the plants we want to use that are going to survive, and they specifically are going to work, in this type of installation. And I think and I think that's another one of those items that, not to, be presumptuous, but it feels as though that's really would be one of those items that would be aligned with a later review, and you guys would approve sort of a concept earlier and then hold us to it. If it is not matching with what you were anticipating, then that's sort of on us to make sure that it gets to where it needs to be.
I just wanted to have that conversation so that Heather.
Yeah, I think it would be okay. Here's specifically the reason I noticed it this time when I saw that example from Portsmouth is that if for some reason in New England, it's not really feasible to have a green wall from the wall and put the soil, I don't know exactly how that works, but it's like we're not a temperate climate. What I saw in Portsmouth is that they had to have the example from Portsmouth that you gave us is that there was space on the ground. There's basically like ground level planter type things in the ground, and that if the building is at the lot line, if it's at the sidewalk, and you find that you actually need to have things growing from the ground, that affects the building, right? Because then you wouldn't have the space between the sidewalk and the building to do that. So that's why I was noticing that and asking about it.
So Heather, just a quick clarification. The wall that runs along Chute Street and actually that wraps, that podium wall is actually deeper and thicker because it has to have the structure of the can weather and handle the inclement climate that we have here.
That makes much more sense to me than what I thought I was seeing on the renderings and at the scale that I was able to see it on my computer. That addresses my concern, actually.
So we'll go ahead and
I
vote.
do see that Lorraine has her hand raised.
I do. I have one other suggestion, I guess. You're talking about things being screened and stuff like that, and you also said that to us. I feel like I'm in meetings 4 years ago. If you can make sure the screening isn't like wood pallets, like your drawing should be exactly what they're going to look like in the end, or you're going to have somebody like me who's angry that it's not what was represented, what was presented to us. So like screening, I mean, it should be something of substance, of, something that looks really good, and not just something that covers whatever it is you don't want people to see. And even the living wall and all the greenery and everything, like, should be of substance. And we were told all that as well. And I feel like because you're the same architect, I want to put out to you that there should be more on the back here. So in that Chute Street building, there should be more. If you're gonna build that kind of building. Anyways, I had to say it because I'm so I'm living it. And I don't know if Sue is still in the audience, but like she was, when you were talking about people being afraid of living through the noise and the mess and the dirt and whatever. I mean, it's all everything they say it's going to be. We just lived it 3.5 years, and yes, their house is going to be filthy, and they're going to live in noise and stress for a couple of years, and it stinks. So I know there's not a whole lot of abutters to all of these buildings, but there are some, and even if it's just a few lives that are being affected, it's substantial. It's big. Yeah, we have to watch out for each other. I mean, I envy the people behind your building who sold their house. I'm like, God, I should have been strong enough to do it myself. But I wasn't, because I love my neighbors. And but now I live in, it's constant noise. Even the people's voices and the screaming and the fighting. Like, it's crazy. It's regular life living behind me, but it's 55 units. So anyways, I'm gonna leave the meeting before I, get super upset. But anyways, just make sure to put on that plan exactly what's gonna happen. Or you're gonna have people, mad, like I am.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you, Lorraine. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I am still here.
No problem. Good luck.
And I'd just like to add, for me, that's a rental income property. So I have high probability that I'm going to lose very precious income during this time of building. So you're impacting multiple businesses and personal lives, which I don't know that this town meeting has any ability to impact my loss of revenue when I lose my tenants over this. But that's just something to be considered in keeping your neighbors happy.
We know that you'll continue to speak up when it's necessary.
Oh, yes.
Good. All right, so do we?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Before we close this and move to schedule the next meeting, I would like to discuss with the board the waivers that will be requested specifically for the density. As we know, we do have a town meeting coming up on November 8th, and there was a citizen's petition to put a hold on any 40R projects. Now, while that is most likely not enforceable. Based on what we hear at town meeting, we may want to revisit the waivers. Now, we're given the ability to have a waiver for business on the ground floor. We're ability to give the waiver for shared parking, and the other major impact would be high energy savings or energy efficiency building construction. Now, with this project, we're going down in business space, retail space, from currently 8,500 to 4,800. And I don't really see much difference between required energy savings in the construction than what Massachusetts requires based on their building codes. They're asking for 31, which is almost 4 times the current density. And I'm wondering if the board, or any members of the board besides myself, have any issues with granting a waiver for that big a density. I'd rather start questioning it now and giving the applicant at least some advance notice. Because from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from town, I don't think I could go for 4 times the density on this project.
Do we have a list of waivers for this project?
There is, and there's a draft decision, I think, that actually includes what those are.
You don't have draft decision in front of you?
Pull it up really quickly off the top of my head. It is height.
It's page 12.
Yep. So we're looking at density. They're asking for 80 units an acre, where 20 is off-street loading bay requirements. We'll need to clarify the height with the building. There might be a waiver requirement for that. Some of the parking dimensions, such as the space widths for compact spaces, and even their standard spaces, I believe, on this project require a waiver. And then garage drive aisle widths are required in the bylaw to be at a size for 2-way traffic. This is a 1-way flow design. So they're asking for a waiver from that.
How many acres is this?
It's just about a half an acre.
Just over 17,000 square feet, I believe, correct?
It's 18,000.
So here's, right, the big waiver here, right, there's request is density. And I guess, right, if you were to, if this were to develop with the density required without a waiver on that, you would build 10, it would be 10 units. I'm going to say that if taken from a town-wide perspective, that of any parcel, well, I guess there's really 2 parcels in town that probably deserve to have more density than 20 units per acre. It's probably this one and what was developed, certainly would, that overlook the train station. I mean, taken from a planning, a town planning perspective, this is where some density I'm gonna say over 20 units per acre should be. Now, right, the question, Tony, that I get to is what is the right density? But I would have no problem saying the right density is not 20 units per acre in and around the depot. We'd be wasting a precious resource and probably, I don't know, I know there's a lot of move afoot to at the state level to require towns to have high densities around train stations. I haven't followed it enough to really know where we all.
I believe that number is 15 right now
15 units
per acre.
around train stations.
Not just train, any mass transit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make these numbers like statewide
Yeah,
scenarios, and they don't
15
really
units an
fit.
acre is like,
Yeah.
not, I mean. So I guess, Tony, no, it's a good question to bring up. I'm fully in support, even, with regard to what's happening at town meeting, that I think that this property deserves our consideration of a waiver above the 20. This is my opinion, right? And, whether it's what was proposed at 75, right? I think that's a question, but I personally have no problem saying that a waiver is appropriate at this location for that component.
I agree.
I wanted to bring the discussion up ahead before we get to the end. So at least everybody's kind of aware and understands, and town meeting knows that it is something we are looking at.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah.
I think, right, most of the other, right, the waiver what were the other waivers, loading?
Maybe a slight height waiver request. I think the max building height was 49 feet. Off-street loading bay size that are requirements, and parking dimensions. They have some compact spaces, and their standard spaces, I think, are half a foot smaller than required.
Half a foot narrower or shorter?
Narrower. I will.
No, they're standard. They're Reading standard. They're 8.6 wide, and then our compacts are 7 or 8. Our compacts are 8 feet. On-street parking is a 9x20, I believe.
And then our garage drive aisle widths, which we have required at 20. Sorry, let me pull up the decision. I have it all.
So in our parking bylaw, for off-street parking spaces in enclosed accessory structures, such spaces shall not be less than 8 feet 6 inches in width and 17 feet in length, with 26-foot aisle widths.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the aisle width was an issue because we only have one
Right,
direction.
right.
Right.
And since it's a one-way circulation, it makes sense that it doesn't need to be, and it's diagonal, right? So it makes sense
It's
that.
60 degrees, so the US Department of Transportation, it sort of lays it out in like 16 foot strips, and so like the 60-degree angled parking fits in a 16-foot angled depth, like the depth of it, and then the drive aisle next to it's 16 feet. But obviously that's not aligned with the language of Reading.
Right.
Reading has its own specific language for what it needs, so if there's a waiver, we're happy to provide that.
Yep. That's why I was flagging it.
Yeah, in this, right, I would say, right, in this layout or even on this parcel, if you dedicated 26 feet to aisle width in the parking garage, you're doing something wrong, right?
is the
We're
width?
wasting space.
What is the width of the aisle? Sorry.
Right now, it says it should be 16.
It is 16.
And that's what, okay.
That's US Department of Transportation standard.
Okay. I think that works. So, but definitely one thing I've been thinking about recently is like, the smaller the spaces get, the more important having like extra aisle width is, right? To make those maneuvers, right? So you think this would work? Like you're comfortable with this, John?
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, the one, and I did say that originally I had a problem with the way the circulation out at the end, and it seems like with your new, you know, you shortened that up and you ended up changing the configuration there a little bit. I think it shortened up the middle aisle probably by a half a space, and it seemed to work a lot better than when you had that other, when you were trying to, you had to jam
We
in
also had
another.
we moved the trash room into a center space.
Yeah. I saw that it worked better.
And then that space number 3 was one that was sort of flat. We had two spaces that were flagged initially. I think Jamie just mentioned our first space is where our trash, we removed the one where the trash was because that was not easy to get into. And then space number 3, we also had a question about whether or not you could have the proper distance for it to back out. We have it space 19, or it has 20 feet of clearance from space number 27C, that looks like. So
Now, you've got a preponderance of compact spaces, is that correct?
we have 30%, or we're just under 30%, which is the 40R number. That they allow for 30% compact.
And well, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but
There are
that is
more
what
SUVs on the road.
that is what we have approved in other in other developments. It would be interesting, Julie. I don't know if we can get that. You know, I know you've worked on getting other, you know, information about usage in other spaces, in other developments. I'm curious of that compact space use versus regular, and if that 30 is too much or not from other places.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the projects that retain control over their ability to allocate and reallocate spaces as different tenants come in with different needs, that's worked out fine. So like an example of what to do in that, to get to that same end would be like each apartment comes with a parking space, but it's not a specific number space, right? It's so, and the management company or whatever retains the control to reallocate them if needed.
We have a different project that was similarly at the same time as condo building that is a mixed use 40R type project, and that one had that exact issue, which is East Flats has done well with its car parking because it can reallocate. It knows that it has someone coming in with a compact space into a new unit. It can reconfigure versus the condo where you're deeded a certain parking space, and so you have to buy the space knowing it has a compact space, or you have to buy, and then, you know, to the extent that your car is a compact car, you know, that's a second question after that. And so I think that there's, I guess, as to just restate what Julie said, there's a much better chance to optimize the parking to fit the actual demand that's going to be in the building with the apartment building.
Yeah.
Are we still allowed to talk? Would you close the hearing?
We're not closing the hearing.
We're not closing the hearing. Okay, we're not closing the hearing, so you
Not
may.
unless y'all are gonna vote tonight.
No. I don't think so.
No, we still need to hear from Ryan and others.
Right.
So I think that was, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, thanks. Just quickly, because I know it's getting late. But I'm sure learning a lot that you have a lot more discretion than I understood based on what Tony has just said and the reservations he has is everything that town meeting has said in 2 instructional motions and now this new article is really just to ask you to use your discretion between this 20 acre minimum, 20 units minimum that's in the 40R law and what you've actually been giving people. There's obviously I think there's a lot of room to have these things be economical between those two numbers. You know, not all the way down like you were saying, John, but boy, you could accomplish everything everybody's talking about. You could create the open space, you could create walkways through these projects, you could help the neighbors out who are hit hard by these. Seems like you all have it right in your hands, and I just hope you use the discretion that I'm learning you have, while still allowing intensive transit-oriented development, which is good public policy and a good way to go. But it's really just tweaks that people have been asking for. And it seems like you have the discretion. That's all I wanted to say, so I hope you use it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say because we have the power to keep someone down at 20 units an hour doesn't mean that if we exercise that, that's what we will get. I've been on the board long enough that I know that one group of planning board members created a accessories apartment unit regulation that required certain sizes of all the units, because that's what we wanted. We didn't want too big a spaces, too big a units, and they put all of these layers, and you know how many times it was used? 0, because because it was the economics of it. So.
Right, and nobody's saying you have to keep it at 20, but also you don't have to go all the way to the 80 or the 75. I mean, it seems like common sense. It has to be economical to build 20 units that might sell for $500,000 here instead of 31, and maybe they'd be a little nicer. But anyway, and you'd have less traffic and you'd have less parking congestion and some good things out of that. So it's neither extreme. It's
If I could try a quick.
adjusting.
Yes, please.
Just relative to the density question, I mean, certainly there are economics involved behind all of this, and a lot of this becomes what can we provide at a project that the cost of those things that we're providing, and certainly density being a unit count question, drives right into that factor. And as Mr. Weston said, if it was being held to a 20 unit per acre, it's not going to be built. It just won't.
Right.
That number is the minimum required by the statute to allow a town to take advantage of this statute. And that's the minimum the town passed. It was meant to give discretion to this board. That discretion isn't like a variance. It's actually a waiver to allow for smart development, and that's really what we're proposing tonight. 31 is the result of my client doing a lot of going back to the drawing board based on the previous 2 meetings. A lot of great feedback from this board, from the abutters, from staff. And so this number is pretty important to us. And I recognize the political pressure in town. I recognize the bylaws are being revisited. But this is the smartest of smart growth projects. It's across from the train station. It's a site that's meant to be developed in this way. Thank you.
It is. I just want to clarify what I said, and then I'll get off this. When I said 20, I wasn't saying 20 units per acre. I was saying, for example, a project that wants 30, which would be 80 units an acre, would probably still be economical in the 20s, not that it would be 20 units per acre. I'm just saying between the 20 units per acre and the 80 units per acre that the Cpdc has been approving lately, I believe would still be economical. But yeah, it's neither extreme. So I just wanted to clarify that when I said 20, I wasn't meaning hold you to 20 units per acre. I was saying.
We hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you.
Because I did think you were at 20 units an acre, but I get what you're saying. So
Yeah, that wasn't what I was saying.
yeah, I get it. Thanks.
I didn't think you were talking about an acre either. Just a comment.
Yes.
I'm sorry. One quick thing. So I'm sorry.
I
think the other thing,
That's fine.
I think you both mentioned that the economic forum that you guys were in, or listened to, excuse me, there's a push-pull with everything, right? And I mentioned this in the last meeting. I think you guys have pushed us correctly to build a very nice, expensive building. And I think that building includes affordable units, which is absolutely the right thing to do, and it's per the statute. There's an incredibly dilutive effect of affordable units on the overall pro forma of a project because of the rents that you're expected to rent them to and the subsequent value of those units. So believe it or not, it's not something where you can just say, well, why can't you do 25 units versus 31 units versus whatever? There's a more complicated algorithm here, and it really affects. One unit actually makes a massive difference because you have this affordable component that's drawing down the economics of the pro forma, albeit for a social, obviously, an absolutely right reason. But I just didn't want to leave that out there.
No, we appreciate what goes into this kind of planning for this number of units. We'd love it to be smaller,
I appreciate it.
but we understand its proximity to the train station is a big draw. And for that reason, probably,
Can we just,
yes.
that the Met is across from the train station and it's not fully rented. 30 Haven Street is not fully rented and that's near the train station. That's
Certainly in
I'm
the
stating a
purview
point.
of the developer to hire a
saying
good real
point,
estate.
and they all have the same amount of rental income, they all go for the same amount of money. I'm sure he's gonna go for the same amount of money, because if he goes too high, he's not gonna rent it. They all go for 2,300 and up, and they're not rented. The Met is a Airbnb,
Now, we've heard this before,
so
and I don't know what
I
the
know for a
town's
fact.
permission of Airbnb is, but
But
I would
anyways,
say
they're
no.
not fully occupied.
But that's neither here nor there.
You keep saying across from the train station, across from the train station. These are across from the train station.
Understand.
And they're empty.
We understand, but that's certainly the responsibility of the developer
Yeah, I know, I'm
to
just
have
saying.
a good real estate agent.
You keep
No, we
stating
understand.
that. The guy that owns the Met is a very good real estate man, so.
Yes, please.
I believe Ace Flats has 50.
Ace Flats is flooded.
52 of 55 units, 52 of 55 units.
A lot of Section 8.
And there's a broad distribution of economic availability within that building, and it has 52. I think as of last week, there was 52 units.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Section 8, because people have come and told me. And how come the green tomatoes not moving in there? Because it's flooding, so.
There was some water that was getting in from the street, but I think that was fixed when they installed a curb next to the
Right.
train.
Okay, that's it. That has nothing to do with this. I just want to go.
Please, you had another
Just a
comment.
quick point. There's nothing wrong with Section 8. It's actually a very good program for very important affordable housing reasons.
Right.
Section 8 is a good thing.
Yes.
I just want to put that on the
Yeah,
record.
thank you.
Thank you.
No, we
Appreciate
appreciate
the
that.
comments.
All right, now I think we can close any discussion if we have nobody else on the line.
Move to continue the public hearing to
December 13th, 9:30.
9:30.
Killing me.
Yes.
I said I didn't want to be with my kids, but Jesus, Andrew.
We do 7:30?
If you want to go to
9:30 is
January.
9:30, I think that's late.
Although we can't give them 7:30.
I know we can't give you a
They're already
set.
taken.
So December 19th at 9.
13th.
Nine.
December 13th at 9:30.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
Second,
All in favor? Continuance
Here.
here?
aye.
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 Got it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, this was
I appreciate it.
worthwhile.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Sorry to keep you so long.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. I think I sent you a letter a while back.
Can we forego minutes?
Probably.
Can you send them to us and I'll mark up minutes?
Sure thing. They're in the drive. I'll send an email tomorrow within 2.
I did not buy the nights.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I leave that up to you guys, whatever you want to
So
do.
what are we doing next?
Anything else that is timely that we need to?
Floodplain?
That can wait.
Yeah.
I mean, it can wait till the public hearing.
I appreciate that. I mean,
I'll send it around in advance. You can see what you think.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I don't
You have a
miss
question?
anything else.
Tony?
Nope, I didn't. I said sending it around in advance sounds just fine.
Yep, I think so.
I did want to just say, well, before you adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
So if y'all haven't seen the Your Downtown survey.
Yes, thank
I
you.
have filled it out,
And the
dear.
park survey, please take them. And then also just one additional, MAPC-led Zoom webinar regarding how zoning tools can advance a vision, with, again, a preview of the 40R rezoning ideas that we're kind of working on December 1st. It'll be a preview, on that date, because your hearing's opening on the 6th, and I recognize you all haven't really had a chance to dig into it yourself. But we will be having another public kind of event on December 1st. Related to
Okay.
zoning and 40R and using tools to advance a vision. The vision is stated in the survey. I think it's like pretty upfront in the survey, right?
Yep.
It's for people to read and ratify or disagree with, or, so. Those are the upcoming meetings.
I was glad we didn't have to vote on this. I'd rather have Nick here.
So would,
Well, there is still a lot for them, there was a lot in,
Yeah?
there's still a lot to cover, I think. There's a lot in Ryan's memo, but anyhow, we continue
is,
this.
will we be
I'm
able?
sorry, do you mind moving away from the door? Sue, can you move away from the door? We can't hear.
Will we be able to use some of that material? I don't know if it's good, or I presume it's good stuff because MAPC and, right, is MAPC putting it together, or you?
Well,
I mean, you do good stuff too, right? But
Yeah, it's yes, I mean, our goal is to incorporate everything that we're doing with this whole Your Downtown process into what we bring forward.
But I guess what I was thinking is, you know, can we use stuff from the first for our, if those same topics come up on the 6th during our
Yes, absolutely, yes. And so for the 6th, for the 1st, I'll post you guys, so feel free to all come. And then, and listen in and be part of that dialogue. It's gonna be similar to the format of the last one, which was a webinar style with a Q&A. I
Is
think,
that the one with Tregorth? He did that. It's not good. We didn't have enough discussion.
yes, I agree, and I
It's really not good.
I agree with that sentiment, and I hope
We were
this
sitting
one
on our
will
hands
be
about that
longer.
one.
It did get cut off. I felt like a little too early, but we'll try to have this one take the time it needs. And what was I gonna say? Lost my train of thought. Oh, yes, so feel free to all come and participate in that.
All right.
And then any ideas that we get from that will be brought right into the 6th.
We can try to send you what I showed today, maybe a little more fleshed out to you guys, so you have it in advance of the 6th.
Right, and actually to Pam's point about it being cut off too soon, we do have all the questions that were asked, and so, and even the ones that went unanswered, and we're putting together some kind of responses and answers to the ones that we can, so.
I did think some of the, sort of the viewpoint that provided was worthwhile.
What? Which meeting?
The developer one.
The developer one.
Yeah, I thought there's a lot of good insight there.
Okay, so is that all? It's 11.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Closed. That was another long one.
Thanks, everybody.